Oh, I want to tell you that Councilmember Robertson has an excused absence. So City Clerk, could you please do the roll call?
Thank you, Mayor Robinson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Nunhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale. Here. Councilmember Lee will be joining us shortly. Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn. Here. Thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening there are, pardon me, I'm having an echo. Quickly. Okay, there are 14 speakers this evening.
Okay.
Which does push us beyond our 30-minute total time limit for oral communications. Therefore, the mayor is authorized to give preference to those speaking to items on the agenda this evening or who have not spoken to council in the last quarter. I also need to remind everyone that in compliance with Washington State public disclosure laws, regarding the use of public facilities during elections, no election-related topics may be discussed during oral communications or during other public participation points on tonight's agenda. This includes promoting or opposing ballot measures or supporting or opposing a candidate for election, including one's own campaign. Those who start beginning discussing topics of this nature will be asked to stop. I need to also point out that on tonight's agenda under item 10A, there is an informational briefing from King County on the King County Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy. No comments during oral communications can be taken on that topic. I do notice a couple of folks signed up, and I will ask a question of those folks when I get to them. And with that being said, I will call our first speaker, which is Clifford Cawthon. Mr. Cawthon, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Your time begins now.
Excellent. Hello, council members and Madam Mayor. Thank you for giving me a moment to speak today. As some of you know, my name is Cliff Cawthon. I'm the Advocacy and Policy Manager for Habitat for Humanity of Seattle, King, and Kansas counties. We appreciate the City of Bellevue moving quickly on its next right work agenda. We're in support of the council advancing a waiver, or rather studying the waiver, and we are in support of advancing a type of waiver for permit review and inspection for projects that are 100% affordable at 80% AMI or meaningfully incorporate affordability into them. During your study session tonight, you'll learn more about this proposal of a fee waiver for permit review and inspections on permanently affordable housing. This waiver would be a straightforward and effective action to take in order to incentivize creating affordable housing for everyday people who work in Bellevue: teachers, bus drivers, grocery store workers. Bellevue's housing crisis is excluding everyday people from being able to live and work in the city and driving more and more people away from economic opportunities and resources. Building affordable housing is key to addressing this crisis, as many of you have expressed and many of you know. This is a crisis for many of the people who we work with who are unable to afford rising housing costs and see affordable home ownership as a solution. In order to build those permanently affordable homes, you need to be able to afford to move forward with a project as well as other affordable housing providers. Increased development costs kill affordable housing projects. Overall, decreasing the cost of affordable housing increases the likelihood of having permanently affordable housing in Bellevue. It may be cliche for me to say this at this point, but we believe that this is an investment in making the city one where, as our mission states, where everyone can have a safe, decent, and affordable place to live. So thank you for your consideration on this matter, and have a good evening.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Craig Spiesel, I believe is here in person.
Good evening. My name is Craig Spiesel, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of many of my neighbors who live in Lockhaven. We are in opposition to the planning staff's preferred alternative for the EIS for the Northwest Quadrant, including the classifications of R medium and R high throughout Lockhaven. Over the past several months, the planning department has advanced many initiatives. We appreciate their work and their professionalism, yet the sheer volume of the proposals has been overwhelming. The capacity to digest and understand the impact of the EIS is a significant challenge. The aggressive timeline has prevented meaningful public engagement. And as stated by some commission and council members, your ability to make informed decision about the EIS is very limited. It's important to note that the community is still trying to understand the complexities and the impact of House Bill 1110. And now with the increased height of the same properties up to 6 stories, the compounded impact will forever change the character of our neighborhoods. While some of these changes may be reasonable for commercial district, the expansive scope of the EIS, including single-family homes, is fundamentally wrong. The preferred alternative is in direct conflict to the principles and assurances made by this council over the past decade. The wedding cake model championed by the city made it possible for substantial investment in residential properties outside the downtown core. Yet if approved by the city, the EIS would be abandoning this agreement with the community. In summary, the preferred alternative should not be approved for the following 7 reasons. 1, it directly conflicts with the comp plan that was approved less than 2 years ago. Diminishes the buffer and separation between Bellevue and Lockhaven. Number 3, does not consider the loss of privacy to nearby properties. Number 4, does not consider the loss of light and shadow footprint on adjacent properties and impact to the tree canopy. 5, does not reflect the impact to traffic, pedestrian safety, parking, and curb management. Number 6, does not consider the impact to utilities, infrastructure, including police and fire resources. And number 7, it lacks an economic impact assessment to the homeowner's property values. Our ask for you is to send the EIS back to the planning department. Council needs to require a data-driven analysis and establish a realistic schedule to allow all stakeholders adequate time to review these proposals. Over the past 24 months, this council has made significant progress increasing housing alternatives and topographies. But today, council needs to draw a line in the sand of what's reasonable. Increasing density at all costs should not be the answer. We need your help to preserve our great neighborhoods. Thank you for all your work in making Bellevue a great city. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Andrew Calkins. Mr. Calkins, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oops, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson and members of the council. I'm Andrew Calkins, the Director of Policy and Intergovernmental Affairs at the King County Housing Authority and serve as the co-chair of the East Side Affordable Housing Coalition. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you for your commitment to continually looking at ways to bring more affordable housing to Bellevue. To that end, I'm speaking today to lend my support to the permit review and inspection fee reduction proposal for affordable housing construction in Bellevue. As we all know, our region is facing significant challenges when it comes to affordable housing. And while we need to build more homes for people at all income levels to address a housing shortage, it's imperative that we also provide greater opportunities for nonprofit and public entities to develop new, permanently affordable housing sites to support Bellevue's lowest income residents. I strongly urge the city to move forward with the proposal to waive development permit and inspection fees on affordable housing construction. This would serve as a catalyst for the creation of additional affordable units in the city, foster a welcoming environment for affordable housing developers, and increase the financial feasibility of affordable housing projects. Affordable housing developers face numerous financial hurdles in developing housing options that have rents that are within the reach of low-income families. Projects typically have an array of public funders and accompanying procurement and environmental requirements. Permit review and inspection fees can exert significant pressure on the financial viability of a project, and by waiving these fees, the city can alleviate the financial strain on affordable housing developers. And Bellevue can lead the way on this issue and ensure more affordable housing units come to the city and on a faster timeline. In crafting the ordinance, I encourage the city to ensure fees are waived and expedited for new construction, as well as substantial rehabilitation projects, and to write the ordinance so that public entities can access the waiver as well. Lastly, in addition to supporting the city's reduction of fees and expediting permitting for affordable housing projects, we also support the city maximizing SEPA categorical exemptions to reduce development costs, reduce regulatory burden, and bring more affordable units to market faster. Together, these proposals would be home runs for Bellevue, and I encourage you to move them forward. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on our list is Jody Alberts, who is here. There.
Robinson, council members. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Bellevue Chamber regarding the SEPA exemptions in support of. The Chamber appreciates and encourages the city's continued work on simplifying and streamlining the permitting process. The efficiency of the city's permitting process, as the council well knows, is key to addressing the housing crisis we're currently experiencing. It's the pipeline to which all projects flow and is an indicator of the city's relationship with the private sector, and specifically the development community. So the city's work on this really shows that they care about that relationship. With this in mind, we'd like to highlight Senate Bill 5412 that would allow for all residential mixed-use projects to be SEPA exempt if a city chooses to do so. The Chamber is fully supportive of studying this approach and as to whether allowing residential projects to be fully SEPA exempt would streamline the process. We continue to be in support of the city's Next Right Work efforts in addressing housing metrics in Bellevue. Because increased housing supply improves market conditions, especially when it comes to affordability, we urge the city to consider streamlining permitting for both affordable projects and market rate projects. Jurisdictions in the past decades were unable to keep up with market demands for housing, which has had a rippling effect on our housing supply, and therefore their current lack of affordability. We are now left with the unfortunate task of picking and choosing who deserves housing the most in the current environment. Housing affordability continues to be just as much of an issue for a majority of Bellevue's workforce, and as the Chamber of Commerce, it's our priority to ensure that workforce can afford to live where they work. This should not be only a priority for us as an organization, but the cities as well. So we continue to appreciate the work that you're doing on this and hope that we can continue the partnership that we have with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Barbara Braun, who's joining us virtually. Ms. Braun, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Your time begins now.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Barbara Braun. I appreciate all the planning work being done across the city that will allow density and affordable housing while maintaining our values, such as livability, climate, tree canopy, etc. And I am generally supportive of measures and incentives to streamline the permitting process that will increase housing production and housing diversity within the city. That said, I think it's important to set forth clear objectives for the categorical exemptions work so that the permitting of these projects does not result in building stock that compromises our values, our equity goals, or our sustainability goals. Since the bulk of additional housing in the next 20 years needs to be affordable, and with our pending densification strategy, we must assume that most of the new buildings will fall under the categorical exemption process and therefore will have a significant influence on the quality of life in Bellevue in the future. It must not be treated as somehow lesser than the rest of Bellevue in terms of quality or standards, or so tiny in its percentage of new building that compromise has no impact. With the proposed exemption levels for single family, multifamily, and commercial increasing so dramatically in the proposal, we could easily end up with a large swath of compromised building stock that is more of a liability than a step into the sustainable mid-century. I urge the council to step back tonight to make sure the scope and objectives of the SEPA categorical exemptions project includes the thorough assessment to ensure this permitting process will still result in buildings that meet our emissions goals, are not heat islands, have 40% tree canopy, do not compromise the environment, are not built on substandard sites, have adequate and safe infrastructure, and meet our quality of life and livability goals. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Alexa Raro.
Good evening. I'm Alexa Rill, Bellevue resident for 14 years. First, I wanted to thank you for approving the full police department budget in November. It was a necessary step for supporting our growing city. But the next step is to retain current police officers while expanding the department with the best candidates possible in an extremely competitive recruiting environment. This isn't Chief Shirley's responsibility alone. As our city council, you also bear some of this burden. Because as they are discovering in Seattle, recruiting and retention in this environment isn't as simple as increasing the budget, improving a website, pivoting a brand, or hiring wellness dogs. The truth is, police officers don't want to work for a city council that doesn't understand the job or see the people behind it. So my suggestion for council members and the city manager is this. I'd like each of you to go on a third shift ride-along one night this summer with the frontline Bellevue officer. Why? Because the Bellevue City Council needs to have a healthy relationship with the Bellevue Police Department. As a governing body, it is incumbent upon you to make the first move. Healthy relationships require an understanding based in curiosity. Spending a few hours with a frontline officer is an act of curiosity. You should be curious to know that third shift police officers experience higher levels of diabetes, heart disease, sleep issues, and mental health conditions. And you should be curious to know that up to 1 in 4 police officers may screen positive for depression, anxiety, PTSD, self-harm, or suicidal ideation. Most of all, you should be curious to know that law enforcement officers have a 54% increased risk of suicide compared to the general population. To keep people, you have to treat them like they are worth keeping. Showing up curious is a good way to do that. Please take this as an opportunity to get to know the human beings behind this difficult and increasingly complex job. I've put together a small packet with more information, which I handed to the city clerk, and there's one for each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Nicole Myers.
Hello. When I was reviewing the documents for tonight's meeting, I was honestly shocked to find that we don't already have permit expediting as an incentive for affordable housing. And I hope that in addition to improving that in parallel with tonight's work, that you'll consider protecting trees with a similar mechanism. As a city, we have an agreed upon goal of 40% tree canopy, and lots which meet the 40% goal at the time of project completion should be given priority in the permitting process. If there's a multiplier based on height, this incentive might be most relevant to building sites with big old trees. For instance, there might be a double credit for trees over 75 feet and triple for those over 100 feet. I would be so happy to see a lot that has 15% coverage with trees over 100 feet tall given priority in the permitting process. And I believe it will make that lot more valuable to the developer with the trees than without the trees, avoiding some of the preemptive cutting. I also think we could have potentially credit for canopy that extends over the lot line with the agreement of the neighbor, and a bonus for tree canopy along the street. So even though many projects won't qualify for this, I think it's an incentive that is feasible in many cases for a developer to take advantage of. I also wanted to talk about growth. In the fall 2022 scoping meeting handout, it said that the number of new housing units would be 45,000 to 50,000, or up to 65 to 70,000, depending on which alternative was chosen. I didn't think it was realistic to add a city the size of Escondido and just plop it on top of Bellevue, so I imagined that the lower end was more likely and still absolutely ambitious. And then in the draft EIS, table 5-6 shows that the new range is 59,000 to 95,000 units, depending on what alternative is chosen. Now we're not talking Escondido, it's Modesto or San Bernardino getting added to Bellevue. Also completely unrealistic, right? But as of this month, if you look at what's been going on with the Planning Commission meetings, it appears that even DEIS Alternative 3 is not necessarily an upper bound for our 2044 zoning. I don't think anyone is tracking what increases in population the changes here and there might represent, but I hope we do start tracking that. And I also see a mix and match approach with selective changes that might have generated more comment earlier if people had known that that was an option. As a city, we spent so much money putting this, money on consultants, putting this DEIS together. And it was a big time commitment for any individual to read through over 1,000 pages. We should use the DEIS. If we diverge from it to bump building size or heights upward, I'm asking for adequate public notice with flyers mailed to each home, with a 45-day comment period for the residents, at least for the homes that are close enough to have these bigger buildings looking down on them or into their windows. I also think we need to increase our planning staff to handle this onslaught of new development.
Ms. Myers.
All right. Thank you very much.
I apologize. Your time has expired. Thank you. We do have 3 speakers signed up on the list to what appears to speak about the levy. So I'm going to call your names really quickly here. Amarinthia Torres, Riza Padram, and Jerry Kroon, who I believe are all joining us virtually. If you incorrectly signed up to speak about the levy and intended to speak about another topic, please raise your hand. But as I mentioned earlier, the council will not be able to take comment on the ballot measure this evening. Okay, I'm going to move to the next speaker, and that's Pamela Johnston.
Hi, thank you for listening. The work for the comp plan has reached a critical point. I've been told that you as the city council want to move as quickly as this is possible to get things done for Wilburton and the comp plan by Wilburton this December and the comp plan by next July. We must confront the reality that the current way of working does not focus on collaboration and move forward towards mutual understanding and solutions. I'd like to point out that the woman who was just speaking had some facts wrong, and her facts are wrong based on she hasn't been educated on the DEIS and the plans that were going forward. The things that people see is 95,000 housing units. They forget that that's housing units, not people, first of all. And second of all, they forget that those housing units we're only going to do 35,000 till 2044. We have to figure out what dials we have to be able to turn those back and forth. But that's the only thing we have right now, is the plan is 35,000 more by 2044. It doesn't matter how many we make available, that's what we need to do. We've agreed to 35,000, but we need a dial to say, when can we tone down if it's going too crazy? The current pace does not allow deep thinking or general participation. The community work is volunteer work. Unlike businesses, we have to have time available. We are experts in our neighborhood and our city, but we need to have time available to talk to other people and get everybody's comments, not just our own. On the 12th of June, we were handed the DEIS comments all got put in. And then immediately on the 14th, we got a new set of work, 14 pages, 70 pages, 70 pages, 24 pages, 48 pages, and 21 slides to be commented on the next DES alternative. A number of us in the city, working mostly people that are under the One Bellevue chat mail, have met with Emil and Tara, and we're going to be working on knowing the schedules better. But my word to you is that we really need to think about the schedule, and if you guys are pushing the schedule and without getting the great comment, I need you guys to change your mind on that schedule, and let's get realistic. Thank you.
The next speaker on the list is David Frappier. Mr. Frappier, can you hear me?
Yes, I certainly can hear you.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Wonderful. I just wanted to take a brief moment to share with esteemed members of the council and the mayor that the 4 libraries within the city of Bellevue limits have now expanded our hours to the point that the Bellevue Library and the Crossroads Library are now open 7 days a week. And the Lake Hills and Newport Way libraries will now be open up to 6 days a week. We've added hours into the evening and onto the weekends in order to meet the maximum number of community needs available. I look forward to meeting with all of you in the future and continuing the great work that the libraries and the city of Bellevue do to promote the information literacy and the freedom of information for all of our residents here in Bellevue. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Patrick Satyanathan. Mr. Satyanathan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening to the City Council and all the other attendees of this meeting. My name is Patrick Satyanathan, a resident of Bellevue since 2006. I heard an earlier speaker talk about the need to establish friendly relations between the City Council. For some reason, my tongue seems to be tripping itself up, but I shall proceed. Friendly relations between the City Council and the Bellevue Police, and the suggestion was that City Council members ride along on late night shifts with which the police do, patrols, whatnot. That's a good suggestion. I have a different suggestion. My suggestion would be that the Bellevue Police try to establish friendly relations with the law-abiding residents of this city, one of whom happens to be me. A couple of weeks ago, I live in the Crossroads neighborhood, northeast Bellevue. A couple of weeks ago, I was taking a walk from my home through the Highlands Park to the mall, Highland Park Mall, I believe it's called, with the Safeway, Applebee's, gas station, etc., on 140th Avenue, NE, bordered by Belred and NE 20th Road. The walking path, goes through a picturesque area with a boarded sidewalk, and there's a Kelsey Creek by the side, and there's a picturesque little wooden bridge, which I needed to cross to get to the other side, to get to 140th Avenue, so that I could get to the mall. A couple of transients were hanging out there at the bridge, blocking my path. They were drinking beer. I tried to pass them in a non-threatening fashion, but words ensued, an altercation ensued, but then I managed to escape unscathed and made it across the street to the mall and safety. I did not call 911. Why is that, you may ask? There was a similar incident in 2019, January of 2019, when an employee of a towing company threatened me. And all I did was retreat to my vehicle, pick up a towing chain in anticipation of being attacked to defend myself. He gets to call 911. And what ensued thereafter is a sad tale. By the time I drove back home from that agency to my home at the intersection of 156th and Northup Way, half a dozen police cars had arrived, blocking the entrance to my driveway. They did not let me drive onto my property.
Mr. Satyanathan, your time has expired. Thank you.
That will be continued. Thank you.
Thank you. Then final speaker on our registered list is Alex Zimmerman.
You give me a chance to speak. Yeah, I will. Very nice boy. Yeah, I will speak very nice. Yeah. The Heil, my dirty Nazi pig. My name is Alex Zimmerman, and I live in Bellevue more than 35 years. Guys, answer me for one question, what is I cannot understand for many years. Who's this freaking cretina who make only 30 minutes for 10 people speak? You doing this every year again and again. And 150,000 idiots who live in this city never come and talk. Why? Is this America or German Nazi or Soviet communist? Why is going on? Why 7 banditos who sit in this chamber don't give a chance to speak for 3 minutes? What's going on? It's only 3 minutes, and everybody wants to speak. People don't come, don't speak, because when you have only 30 minutes in 30 minutes, in 10 people only can speak, so every not idiot, normal man looking to, okay, I probably will be late. Guys, I talk about this for many years, and you freaking bandita, Nazi pig, you know what it means, cannot doing this. Nobody have this policy. I speak from Tacoma to Everett for more than 15 years, more than 3,000 times. I speak right now every day in different council chamber. Nobody have these rules. Guys, what is going on, huh? How is this possible? So 7 cretina, a pure bandito, acting exactly identical. And somebody staying for 30 years in this chamber, and another staying for 20 years in this chamber, and another for 10 years in this chamber. What is going on, guys? Who are you? Are you freaking a Nazi? Are you freaking a cretina? Are you freaking a idiota? In 150,000 people who live in Bellevue don't understand, acting like a happy cow. You know what it means? No one, only Alex Zimmerman, come and speak. Guys, stop this idiotic situation. You are pure cretina. You're more dangerous than Nazi or communist, you know what it means, because it's America. Who makes these rules? We have Constitution, freedom of speech, Open Public Meeting Act, but we don't have more Nazi pig. What is you doing? Democrat mafia who controlling everything. I demand again and again and again. Open like every city have around. Like I have Mesley Island, Kirkland, Redmond, Issaquah, Tacoma, everybody
Okay,
have
Mr.
right.
Zimmerman, your time has expired.
Okay. I'm so excited for Mr. Miyake's city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I have 3 items to report under the manager report this evening. The first topic is really a good news item. It's the review of the Bellevue Family 4th event. As council is aware, there was a very successful 4th of July event held in the downtown park last Tuesday. Joining us this evening for a brief post-event report are Patrick Bannon, Bellevue Downtown Association President, as well as Michael Shiosaki, Bellevue Parks and Community Services Director. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the team.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and members of the City Council. You know, I have the pleasure with Patrick Bannon of the Bellevue Downtown Association to provide a recap of last week's, and I think by every measure, very successful Bellevue Family 4th. And first, I'd just like to say it was great to see all of you out at the event last Tuesday with an estimated attendance of 50,000 of our friends, neighbors, and guests. But, you know, first I wanted to start off with a big thank you to the Bellevue Downtown Association, really a wonderful partner in this annual event. And I think from the city side, this was really a one-city effort. Thanks to many, many city staff members that worked the event and also did a lot of planning. So almost 200 staff members in all, primarily from police, fire, utilities, transportation, the Office of Emergency Management, and of course, Parks and Community Services. And then a couple of key, I would say, team member shout outs to Jara Gilmore with Parks and Community Services and Mike Ogliori with the Bellevue Downtown Association. So many hands involved in the year-long planning of this event and the management of all the day of logistics. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Michael. And I am one member of a very spirited team that pulled it all together. And it has been 31 years of mutual support and shared collaboration and pulling the event together. It's a big event at a major scale. And a couple highlights from our end. The main stage saw 3.5 hours of live entertainment, from the soulful sounds of Lady A to the cover band Laurel Canyon Legacy with folk and rock hits, to a stirring national anthem rendition from Newport High School alum Sarah Rose Davis, and of course the Bellevue Youth Symphony Orchestra, who connected with the audience through popular themes from movies to patriotic themes to musical selections that culminated with fireworks display of more than 4,000 shells, and done so in a meticulously safe way, a professional way, from the parking lot at Bellevue Square. So a hearty thanks to our sponsors and partners, including the City of Bellevue, and especially to those in our business community who continue to put forth their resources to help this event happen. Those include Amazon, PACCAR, Puget Sound Energy, and then media partners 106.9 and the Seattle Times. And then finally, our title sponsor, the Bellevue Collection and Kemper Development Company, who have, for the entirety of this partnership, allowed the parking to be used, to provide traffic flow and management, and to be our title sponsor of the event to make it possible. Sterling contributions from the City of Bellevue Parks and Community Services Department, Bellevue Fire, Bellevue Police, Bellevue Transportation, who help the thousands of people get out at the end of the night. And another star of the show that I don't want to have overlooked is the Bellevue Downtown Park itself, which is a legacy, a rich legacy from Bellevue residents, taxpayers, and businesses that gave us this fantastic public outdoor space in which we can celebrate and bring the community together in such a spirited fashion. So the Bellevue Family Fourth is really much more than just a simple patriotic celebration. It's a reflection of Bellevue's extraordinary spirit of unity and community. So on behalf of the BDA board, our membership, and our team, thank you again for your support of this grand tradition.
Great, thank you so much. That was really a wonderful event. Any count on how many people attended?
So, I'm told it's it's not a perfect science, but somewhere around that 50,000, I think, is the number.
Okay.
And every year is bigger than the year before.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
It is thousands of people, yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor and Councilmember, the second item under the manager's report is the Community Crisis Assistant Team, also known as CCAT update. As all of you know, one of the council's new significant investments in the current budget is funding for supplemental and specialized services to respond to people in mental health crises as an alternative to traditional policing. Building on years of success of the Fires Cares program, the Community Crisis Team is now becoming a reality. This item, my last update was provided to you in January this year. We return again today to share the progress to date as we move forward on launching CCAT on the streets. So joining us this evening is Fire Chief Jay Hagan, as well as Major Alicia McKinney from the Police Department. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the team.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhaus, members of council, and City Manager Miyake. We're really excited to be able to provide you with a brief update this evening on sort of work completed in preparations for the Community Crisis Assistance Team. I first want to begin by offering a very sincere thank you for the support of this program, the funding and the support that we are using to bring this program to life. We'd like to share with you some activities since the last time we had a chance to brief you, which my record show was February 27th, and talk about three things: staffing and hiring, training, and program implementation. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Major Alicia McKinney to talk about some police department activities.
Thank you, Chief Hagan. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, thank you so much for allowing us to come provide this update. The police department is very, very excited. We've carefully hand-selected 1 new sergeant and 5 new officers for our CCAT team. We believe that these officers are a perfect fit and an excellent fit for the CCAT team and our community at large. And this team will start training on July 16th, so very soon. Further, Bellevue Fire's CARES program manager, Natasha Grossman, and I attended the co-responder conference that was held back in June, and we presented on our CCAP program at that conference. Not only that, we gleaned additional information from across the nation on co-responder programs so that we can improve and build upon our program. So we're very excited to get this started, and I will turn it back over to Chief Hagan.
Thanks, Major. The CCAT budget included 9 new positions in the fire department to staff the CCAT units and also provide case management follow-up. These new positions included 2 supervisors, a case management specialist, 5 MHPs to partner with the officers to staff those CCAT units, and an admin. As many of you probably know, there has been an increased demand for mental health professionals since the pandemic, which has made hiring in this field a challenge across King County. In spite of this, I'm happy to report that we've had some stellar applicants that we've hired, many of whom are sitting behind me in the audience tonight, and thank them for their attendance this evening, including some that are actually former CARES practicum students, so they are rejoining our program. We're over 75% staffed, and we're still actively recruiting. As of July 1st, all of our new hires are on board and have begun riding along with CARES 1 in preparation for joining their police officer counterparts in that training on July 16th. A cornerstone of our program philosophy is that the CCAT officers and MHPs will train together side by side for a period of about 6 weeks. We have over 11 topics and skills in which the team will be trained, and just a brief sampling would include crisis de-escalation skills, suicide risk assessment, and safety tactics. As Major McKinney mentioned, the training is going to commence next week and begin through the month of August. And, that education, of course, will continue. But we're really happy to let you know that we plan on implementing this capability in our community September 1st with staggered starts that week, which is how we sort of onboard that capability. So again, thank you so much for the support of this program. We've been hard at it, and we're really excited to be pairing these specially trained and selected officers with the folks you see behind me and get this capability on the street. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the presentation.
Mayor, can I make one quick comment or question?
Yes.
Since you're actively recruiting still, can you please share with everybody who's watching where they can find out more information or maybe even apply? Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Yep. I know that HR supports us in our City of Bellevue website, and there's a tab for hiring. And we are, crisis response social worker is the tagline we're looking for there, and we're happy to take all interest.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Great.
The last item under the manager's report this evening is a brief summary of the city's recent federal advocacy trip to Washington, D.C. Janice Atkins, Chief of External Affairs, will provide a high-level synopsis of the visit, which included the Deputy Mayor as well as our federal consultant. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Janice.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Just wanted to provide a quick postage stamp synopsis of our trip to Washington, D.C. One of our council priorities, of course, is regional leadership and influence, and so we wanted to come back and give a little bit of an update on what we feel is an important marker along our successful execution of that priority. You all worked with us during May and June to develop a set of 2023-2024 federal priorities, which you adopted on June 12th. We have this new handsome, graphically designed version that I'll make sure is in all of your inboxes this evening to share with all your fans and friends. And so that was one of the top objectives of making this very efficient 2.5-day little trip, was to make sure that we could share this because this is a little bit of a roadmap of what is in front of our congressional delegation and federal agencies, both today and tomorrow. We wanted to really make it clear what Bellevue's priorities are and where we're asking them for their partnership and assistance. We were able to schedule meetings with all of our delegation offices, both House members, both senators, and a lot of the objective there was also to bolster our current and upcoming grants and earmark requests. We have several earmark requests that are currently moving forward, which is very exciting. You just got an update on the CCAT program, which of course we got pilot funding from Senator Cantwell for 2 cycles ago. And so this can really lead to great things. And so we're really excited about these opportunities and making the most of them. And we also gave some additional support and updates on a number of pending grants, as well as the one we submitted today, which is our Be Safe 2.0 grant application for the Safe Streets and Roads for All program at USDOT. We're very optimistic about our prospects in the second round. And then we were also able, once we got those meetings locked in, to pay a brief but important visit to the National Law Enforcement Officers Museum and Memorial to pay respects to 2 of our fallen officers. And already we've been kind of bringing that full circle. We already hosted Congresswoman Del Bene just last week at one of our fire stations, did actually a CARES visit with our CARES team, who you just had here in the audience, to really understand our casework follow-up and our co-responder model that we are doing both with CARES and with CCAT. And we're already talking with the different delegation offices about how to utilize their August recess time. They're interested in visiting with us and, again, getting out on the ground with us to see some of the things that are highlighted in here, how they can help, where they're at, how far away they are, and who our partners are. So we're very excited about building and strengthening this as an ongoing relationship with our delegation to help them see how the federal dollars and federal policy they put in place really comes to life here at the community level, and then ask for their support at appropriate times to leverage those funds. So just wanted to give you a quick little update. We really appreciated the Deputy Mayor making the time to join us. This is something we hope to do on a regular basis when we have a refreshed set of federal priorities, to really make sure that we're keeping everything very current and being a good partner to them. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Is that it, City Manager?
That's it for this evening, Mayor.
Okay. So under the council business, I wanted to just mention about the opening of Plymouth Crossing today. Councilmember Zahn and I were there today. And Councilmember Zahn, would you like to talk about that briefly?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. What an exciting day. It's our first permanent supportive housing in Eastgate area, and it will have 93 supported units. We heard from our governor was there, along with Representative Adam Smith, and the level of support that the folks that are going to be entering those units are going to get is quite phenomenal. And what they said was that the way that we went about that in the city is really a model for other cities to look at how we're going about doing that. And we're really excited about being able to address some of our homelessness challenges with the permanent supportive housing. And Mayor, I really appreciated your comment, which is perhaps instead of talking about folks that are homeless, we should be talking about folks that currently don't have a home. And
They
that this
need
is housing, and that this is one way that we make sure that our community is taken care of. So thank you.
Yes, it's just to add to what you said, it's fully staffed, it's supportive housing, and it's really a great way to get people transitioning off the street. And I was going to give the Deputy Mayor a second to talk about his trip to DC, since you didn't get to say anything.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Well, I think Genesee covered it quite nicely, and I really applaud staff for being so incredibly organized, as they always are, but especially on this trip, and then working very closely with our federal lobbyists, with Nina and Tony, and making all the appointments, and it was just great to hear how much interest there were in Bellevue. Our federal priorities really resonated, and we had a great opportunity just to get that, as Genesee alluded to, that cadence or that drumbeat that we really want to ensure going forward that we are going to really prioritize what is important to in Bellevue, what we want to work on, how we want to partner on what kinds of projects we want to partner on, and then really just underline the earmarks and the grants that we're very much interested in. But it was a very successful trip on all levels, and look forward to further reports on some of the results of that. But a lot of kudos to staff for putting in all the hard work to make that trip successful, because it took a lot longer than the 2.5 days that we spent there. So that was it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have a public hearing tonight, and I'm going to let the city manager introduce this, but it's on one portion of what we're covering tonight, so I'll let you.
That is correct, Mara. Thank you. As you mentioned, we have a public hearing tonight on a proposed transportation benefit district. And just by way of background, this topic was introduced to council in a study session on June 12th. At that study session, the staff proposed the transportation benefit district as a tool to restore funding for transportation maintenance that was reduced as a result of budget impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as to support ongoing transportation program investments in the future. The first step, which you're alluding to, Mayor, is creating the transportation benefit district. There are multiple steps in this process to consider the funding mechanism that would come later in the process. The purpose of the public hearing tonight is to receive input on the formation of that district. After a brief staff presentation, we'll turn it back to the council to open the public hearing up. And once the public hearing is closed, we will seek council direction on bringing back possibly an ordinance for the formation of a benefit district. Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to, joining us this evening, I forgot, I have to introduce the staff. Andrew Sinkalakis, far right, Transportation Director. To his left is Chris Long, Assistant Director, and to his left is John Risha, Finance and Asset Management Director. With that, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Okay. Thank you, City Manager Miyake, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and City Council. As Brad said, we're here tonight to talk about a public hearing around the formation of a transportation benefit district. And I'm here with John Risha, the City Finance Director, and Chris Long, the Assistant Director of Transportation for Operations. Next slide. And I want to clarify for the public that this is the establishment of the benefit district. It's one of several steps in a long process. Assessing a sales tax or a vehicle license fee, the amount and whether or not it goes to the voters are all decision points that will not be happening at this time. That would occur later. What staff is requesting is that you hold the public hearing and then direct staff to come back later with an ordinance to establish the district. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Andrew. So just a quick recap of why we're here talking about a transportation benefit district. The story starts back in 2020 when the impacts of COVID resulted in each department having to cut 8% from their budget in order to balance the budget in fiscal years 21 and 22. That in the transportation department, that cut was made by reducing the budget in maintenance in order to maintain some of our other programs we had. That resulted in a 20% reduction in maintenance. We referred to this as deferred maintenance because the idea was that we would eventually be able to get that budget back so that we could start doing the things that we had to cut. Unfortunately, due to other city priorities, that deferred maintenance was carried through into 23 and 24, but the idea of the benefit district was born in that process, and we are bringing that back today. Another element that was cut in 21 and 22 was budgeting for new infrastructure. And when I talk about new infrastructure, that's every device, every sign, every pavement marking, anything that we put out on the road for operating our roadways and our sidewalks and our bike facilities are part of that new infrastructure, and they have a value that is quantified to determine how our maintenance budget needs to grow and what resources we need to meet that growing need. With the Transportation Benefit District, this would provide a dedicated funding source for us to continue to keep up with that growth in the maintenance need. And then any revenue that was collected beyond what's needed for maintenance on a biannual basis through the budget process would be allocated to other TIP capital programs or transportation improvement plans that include programs like neighborhood traffic safety, Vision Zero, neighborhood sidewalks. These were all presented during our study session. So with that, John?
Thank you. Tonight, before your public hearing, is the formation of a quasi-municipal corporation, a separate government, if you will. It has an independent taxing authority, and the funding that, should you form it, would be dedicated solely and exclusively for transportation maintenance and improvements. This is a process that forms that separate government. The state legislature has provided an opportunity, should you form it, to actually assume that district so that you could act in your normal capacity as city council members to take action on that district. It does require annual performance and financial reporting, and it is provided for in RCW 3673. There are currently 19 transportation benefit districts within King County. Some of those districts have formed and not placed any funding associated with them. Some of them formed without funding and came back within 1 to 3 years and made a decision about funding. But the decision to form that provided those jurisdictions with that opportunity that they would not normally have available as a city revenue source. Tonight, again, the public hearing is for comments on the formation of the district. The proposed district is the entire city boundaries, and legislative authority can approve the formation by ordinance. Specific to that would be within an ordinance that identifies that Bellevue's Transportation Improvement Plan is the document that governs what projects could be funded or not funded. So it is very specific to the types of programs that would be within the purview of this district. And again, the benefit district would be defined there. Back to Chris.
So just to cover, one of the comments that was received last time was to provide a little more background on what's happening with our outreach. We have started that process. We've had 2 briefings, one with the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce, another one with the Bellevue Downtown Association. Some of the comments and questions received were included in the agenda memo. We are working on getting messaging out to community-based organizations. We hope to reach out to the Bellevue Diversity Advantage Network as well. And as noted here, our website was launched, so we have a lot of information there. We'll continue to build on the frequently asked questions that are there to help educate about the need and how a transportation benefit district is formed. And we will be attending some local events where we'll have a table set up and we can engage with the public and hear where they see maintenance needs, where they see needs for new infrastructure as well. So last, just a reminder on the timeline for this process. We're currently at that second dot where the public hearing. We are recommending or asking for to come back next week to adopt the ordinance for the formation of the district. And then the following week, you'll see a resolution that will kick off the next step, which is the assumption process. And then we'll have another public hearing in September, and that's what the resolution is to set the date for that public hearing. Once the resolution or assumption process is done, then we'll move into the process of identifying the funding. And with that, again, we're looking for the council to hold the public hearing tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So with that, do you have a motion to open a public hearing?
I move to open the public hearing.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. There are 4 pre-registered speakers on the list this evening. And before I start calling those names, I will remind the council that we did publish notice of this public hearing in the paper of general circulation. And the council did receive 3 written comments, which were included in your desk packet this evening. And with that, I will call our first speaker, who is Matt Jack. Mr. Jack, can you hear me? I can, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, council members. My name is Matt Jack. I'm the policy director for the Bellevue Downtown Association, and I'm commenting on behalf of the BDA to share our continued support for the city's proactive care of our transportation infrastructure. We will stay engaged throughout the process as you evaluate a transportation benefit district, TBD, as a possible means to address the deferred maintenance and support future maintenance projects. Similar to the presentations that were made just moments ago and to organizations in the community, we encourage the city to continue its outreach on the why, how, and what behind forming and funding a district. Why, and to that end, I just want to list a few questions to put out there for the city to note and seek to clarify as we move throughout this process. And that is one, why is now the time to explore the TBD as a funding source? Two, why has the budget prioritized funds to build future projects over maintaining existing infrastructure? Three, how will the TBD complement other funding sources and work with the processes like the biennial budget that allocates resources toward transportation projects? Four, what are the direct or indirect costs of a new tax or fee, both for both households and development? Most commercial and residential projects pay sales tax and impact fees on new constructions, as an example. And five, what would be the spending priorities and criteria for decision making? How would funds and projects be evaluated and prioritized in the future? We appreciate the city's legacy of stewardship around infrastructure, principally saving money over the long term by avoiding costly renovations caused by wear and tear or neglect. We plan to continue tracking the city's progress on this topic and engage as the process evolves around funding. I look forward to hearing your discussion this evening, and I appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Heidi Dean.
Good evening, Council. I have mixed feelings about this. I wanted to say I thought that Mr. Jack from the BDA made some really good points as far as the questions that he asked. I also wanted to point out that the outreach seems to have been solely with the BDA and the chamber, not to the anybody else. If you notice, there's 4 of us neighborhood wonks here in the audience and nobody else, because nobody else knows that this is happening, which I find a little bit troublesome. You know, my kid works for the city in transportation, doing these projects that you're talking about right here. So I don't want to say anything that would jeopardize his future job opportunities there. But I do have concerns about at what point this does feel a little bit sometimes like the camel's nose under the tent, kind of opening the door to things. I want to know that if we end up getting taxed more and more and more, that money is going to be used wisely, that there's going to be accountability with this money, because it seems to me that there's a lot more money that's going to be coming in than it's actually needed. I was looking at the information about when it could be dissolved, the TBD could be dissolved, but it did say that all the maintenance was ongoing. So I have questions about that, and I would really hope that if you pass something like this, that you would make sure that there are fail-safes and stopgaps there. And I do know that one of my colleagues back there has better questions than that, but it does feel a little bit weird that it feels very rushed. It feels like the general public doesn't know anything about this, and this is just yet another tax for them to pay, and that's concerning to me. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Maria Frost. Looks like, Ms. Frost, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, your time begins now.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council members. For the record, my name is Maria Frost, and I'm the Transportation Director at Kemper Development Company. I'm here to comment on the proposed formation of a transportation benefit district in Bellevue. We do view the formation of the TBD and the tax that would be imposed through it as inextricably linked, and feel it's important to address the issue of funding, including the city's desired funding mechanism, which has been presented, in deliberating whether the TBD is necessary to form. First and foremost, please consider the higher cost of living and heavy tax burden families are experiencing, paying dramatically more for property, gas, groceries, and other family needs, which this sales tax increase would add to. Only 2 years ago, the city increased the sales tax rate from 0.85 to 0.95% for affordable housing. Just 6 months ago, the city raised the B&O tax and property taxes without voter approval. Bellevue voters and taxpayers also provided the Transportation Department millions in revenue by voting through the Transportation Levy in 2016, which funded a specific list of projects. The new proposal that has been discussed is for another 0.1% permanent increase in the city sales tax rate without a public vote for a dedicated funding source to support maintenance. Yet none of the projects within the broad capital program are clearly defined. Transportation staff indicate the creation of a TBD would meet TR 55, maintain and enhance safety for all users of the roadway network, and TR 56, ensure that maintenance of the existing transportation system be given priority consideration. They further state that the annual deferred maintenance need is $3 million, yet the proposed tax increase would generate $10 million a year, above and beyond what is needed to support the above policy objectives on an annual basis. Further, Bellevue anticipates collecting a record high of $221 million in sales tax revenue for the 23-24 budget cycle. The city projects sales tax collection will grow 7.9% this year, 6.3% next year. For years beyond 2024, the city says sales tax is forecasted to grow by an average of 5.4% per year at best and 4.5% per year at worst. Without a project list, spending parameters, or a defensible reason for the high sales tax rate given stated transportation needs and existing sales tax revenue, council should direct staff to reevaluate this proposal and determine if TBD revenue is truly needed at this time. If council is to move forward with the formation of the TBD, please consider directing staff to create a specific project list that TBD money would fund, include spending limitations, and submit the proposal to Bellevue voters so they can have a voice in the decision. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you. The next speaker on the list is Vic Bishop. Mr. Bishop, can you hear me?
Yes. My name is Victor Bishop, residing at 2114 Westlake Sammamish Parkway in Bellevue. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yes, please continue.
Okay. I'm a retired professional traffic engineer, having worked in Bellevue in the Puget Sound area on traffic issues for 57 years since receiving my graduate degree in transportation from UW in 1966. I am speaking tonight on my own behalf as a resident and taxpayer. Our city is in serious transportation trouble regarding the traffic operations on our arterial street system, as was identified in the DEIS for the Wilburton Implementation Plan. That plan identified very serious, significant environmental impacts for all alternatives that were identified, including the do-nothing alternative. No real mitigation strategies were identified. For several budget cycles, your budget survey identified traffic as the most important issue in the minds of your voters. Gridlock traffic is in the face of Bellevue residents, and new planning shows it getting significantly worse over time. Now comes the proposal to create a transportation benefit district. I fundamentally support the idea of new revenues to improve the road system in our city. There is a discussion of a need for new money to backfill the funds for maintenance of our streets, and that would be a good thing. However, the draft ordinance in the agenda packet requires no such thing. In fact, the language says that the new funds, quote, shall be used for any purpose allowed by law, including, end of quote, a bunch of things, such as, quote, expand and upgrade multimodal transportation infrastructure, end of quote, and, quote, continue optimal performance of the infrastructure over time. This has all the earmarks of a wide open slush fund for staff to do maintenance and any other thing that they might like to do regarding transportation. I will remind the council of the unanimously approved comprehensive client policy TR2, which says to, quote, aggressively expand transportation investments to reduce congestion, end of quote, and do other good things. I will note that the Wilburton DEIS baseline BKR model analysis for 2019 shows that 81% of the person trips in Bellevue are people in cars, and less than 0.5% of the trips are people on bicycles. I suggest that you require staff to A, demonstrate with dollar estimates the specific needs for the new revenue, B, be very specific about how the new funds are to be allocated, including specific projects or programs with proportional allocations of the funds for these specific projects or programs, and C, require the imposition of new tax revenues be approved by the voters. I believe you need to build the case and get voter buy-in. I think transportation requires it. And thank you for holding this public hearing.
Thank you. That is the end of our pre-registered list. So at this point, I would ask if there is anyone else joining us in council chambers or anyone online who would like to make comment to the council during this public hearing, please raise your hand. Okay, I see one additional speaker in the audience. If you could identify yourself by name again, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicole Myers. I think of myself as very much a pedestrian and cyclist. So the idea of having more funds for more active modes of transportation, I think, is very important. And I think that this is probably the kind of thing I would support if I heard about it. I do agree with the previous speakers that, you know, I just happened to look at the council's agenda tonight. I feel like I look at, you know, the Bellevue community news and neighborhood news. I don't know where I missed this particular thing, since it does seem like a big deal, and it does seem like the kind of thing we want the community to all be on board with. In general, I support Vic Bishop's points, and I think this is probably a good idea for Bellevue. I think it's probably in keeping with our high standards for our transportation and our streets. You know, everyone who visits Bellevue says Bellevue looks amazing, and there are so many, you know, as someone who pushes a stroller a lot, it's so nice to walk around Bellevue. And I appreciate the sidewalk network. I appreciate the way the streets are kept clean as a cyclist to prevent accidents, because I've known friends who've like slid out on leaves. So I think there is a lot here that would be good. But, you know, if there is any way we can support public notice for things like this that are a big deal and could meaningfully impact other people, I hope you will try to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do see one additional hand online, and that is Riza Padram. Ms. Padram, can you hear me? Ms. Padram, can you hear me? Okay, well, I'm going to go to an in-person speaker, Mr. Spiesel.
Good evening. I'm Craig Spiesel. I just want to kind of echo some of the comments that Kemper Development made about the concern about the tax, Vic Bishop's as well. I think we're very in agreement. I think there's a few points that I think is really important. It's a recurring theme is the lack of a robust public engagement in a lot of these programs. I looked at the slides that were presented to the council today, and other than the Downtown Association, some other organizations, there was no community engagement. But another thing that I think is really important when we talk about affordable housing is how the increase in a sales tax is a regressive tax. And that's something that really needs to be looked at. The state provides an alternative of increasing the car tabs as an alternative. And I highly encourage, even though I know the Transportation Department has promoted the sales tax aspect, but to reconsider that if this moves forward and really think about the regressive nature and how it's going to hurt some people. We're continually being taxed. We've increased levies and the B&O tax in all these areas, and there's only so much that taxpayers can pay. So thank you for your time, and again, I encourage you, the 2 points, have a more robust and sincere public engagement in this and all programs, and reconsider if it's move forward, how it's funded. through a car tab or other alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I saw Ms. Johnston's hand. Yeah, please come forward.
You know, I agree with the other speakers that this is a very important aspect, that something that's really come up and people don't understand. If I was to put it on your, the voting and say, we're going to be able to raise your taxes 2-3%, people would freak out, you know, we'd hear it all over the place, but because it's just this one method and it hasn't, we're having one meeting here and one meeting there, it's not out there. And so I guess I have double thoughts about this too, because I know that we need money to do these things. It sounds like it's a short-term problem. So that's the other thing. I don't want it to become like a fund that we just always go to in the future when we don't need it. So what is causing our transportation costs now to be up? Is it only because of COVID and not having enough revenue? Or are there other things that are getting in the way? Are we getting more needs because of growth? What is the whole stack of needs that we have here? What is it that's changed other than the COVID funds that makes it a different thing that we need to have another tax on it? Because we'd like to try to keep in our budget the best we can. I know that having a sales tax and a property tax are both things that really have hard to keep steady over time. And so anyway, I think it's a difficult decision, but I would hope that you could ask for more, get it news out there by having the people vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I do see a couple of additional hands online. Amaranthia Torres. Ms. Torres, can you hear me?
Hi there. Yes, I just saw the button. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Amaranthia Torres. I'm the new co-executive director of the Coalition Ending Gender-Based Violence. I just wanted to share a little bit about our work at the Coalition, since we support programs all throughout the county, including programs in Bellevue.
Excuse me, Ms. Torres, I apologize. I am going to stop you. We're actually in the public hearing portion of our agenda. And so the council's only taking comments at this point on the formation of a transportation benefit district. Do you have any comments related to that?
I do not at this time.
Okay.
I will email my remarks on other items, I guess.
That
would be
sorry about that.
Or come back next week.
Okay, great.
We'd like to
Thank
hear
you so
from
much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Do have one additional hand online, and that is Leslie Geller. Ms. Geller, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, your time begins now.
Hello, council members. This is Leslie Geller. I live in Eastgate, and I happen to read a little bit of the packet today. I'm still cleaning up from our block party on Saturday. I had heard about this, but I didn't really know what it was. And I wanted to go on record that I agree with so many of the prior speakers that, yes, we do need that backlog of transportation remediation projects to get done. And it's somehow going to be more taxes, however that gets done. It's like money out of the public's pockets. I feel fortunate that I had a good career and managed to save a lot of money, so I feel less impacted than some other members of the community. Not like I'm inviting new taxes on myself, but this was kind of a surprise. I really don't understand what it's about, and I didn't have time to read up on it. You can probably tell because my comments are totally off the cuff, but I did want to go on record as agreeing with the concerns of many of the prior speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. I do see one additional hand, ma'am.
Ann Coughlin, Northeast Bellevue. I just wanted to make a point that previously has not been made, that another source of funding will be the parking meters downtown, correct? Is that right? I would think so.
We can't respond to you, but.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
I'm on track, though. That wasn't mentioned. Also, this is very, very disturbing. Have you forgotten a revolution has been fought? We're just putting tax, how much are we supposed to take? And not only, it is not limited. They just want it to go on and on. So, I mean, no doubt, it should be very limited in scope, and it should be put to a vote. I mean, where are we going? Are we going to 20% tax here in Bellevue? You know, it's too much. You're talking about affordable housing. How are people who are lower income going to afford, you know, necessities of life here? And we have the highest gas in the nation. Where's that money going? Where are those taxes? You know, like, I just feel it's too much. And again, a lot is just dumped and shoved in without people, the general public, being aware of it. So you do have the lovely newsletter. Some of these things could be put in the newsletter. I'm sure you'd find a fuller chamber if that's what you want. That's what I would like. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time. And please consider this because it's just too much tax. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do believe that brings us to the end. Yeah, I see no more additional hands, Mayor. I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I'm going to open this up to council discussion. Is there anybody who would like to speak? Okay, council member Zahn, followed by council member Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I really appreciate the staff presentation on this and all of the comments that we've heard so far about the importance of making sure that as we look into the formation, the assumption, and then potential funding, that we're getting this right. Because I think that we've always been, as a city, very thoughtful about how we go about looking at any time we want to increase funding and fees, whether it's sales tax or car tabs, and that when we are very clear about the why, the how, the what, actually it's the what are the things, who, what, where, when, and why of things, that then we are a good steward of our finances for our community. So for me, I support the formation of a TBD as another tool in the toolbox. I appreciate the fact that you have information in the packet about all the cities that have one, the ones that form one and never actually did the step with funding, because at the end of the day, it was a tool that was in their toolbox, but they didn't feel the need to pull it out and use it. And then what I would say is that in addition to that, we clearly heard from the community that as we have more discussions, that public engagement absolutely has to happen so that we really are able to talk through what exactly are we talking about, why are we doing it, what are the projects or the maintenance pieces that we're talking about, so that at the end of the day, we're going into this eyes wide open and that there isn't ambiguity about what this is and what we're trying to do. So I look forward to this. Appears to be step one of a process of many steps. And I would say that this is definitely one where we need to go slow so that we really understand what those pieces are and not jump over steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. This is a very, very important topic for me. As you know, I'm very fiscally responsible, and I think that's important. And, we heard compliment to the staff. I mean, it's not you guys. I mean, you guys are great warriors. You know how to fight a war. But this is the same thing as a war versus a battle. You can win many wars, you can fight many wars, but you may lose the battle. All we're doing is we're fighting wars. The wars, we need something. So I supported the the tax benefit TBD. I do, because when you present it to us, we all realize that the council, we need money because of COVID, because of situations. But I believe that maybe more than that, because we were not able to prioritize because there's so many competing interests, which is something out of our hand. We have police, public safety. John just come to join us. The assets we're talking about. It's amazing how much we have to deal with. So it's out of hands. However, we cannot just jump from war to war without having the big picture, which is the taxes are killing us. We heard the public so passionately saying, we are real people living out there. Doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, especially if we are compassionate about poor people. How are you going to handle all the taxes? Who's going to pay the fee? Who's going to pay the taxes? We'll all be poor eventually if we cannot afford to keep up. So we cannot just say, well, let's take the money, and we need to know exactly what we're doing with our money. Expenditure is so important. How are we spending our money? It's easy to raise money. All we have to do is the council vote 4-3, tax goes up. King County does the same thing. State does the same thing. Federal government does the same thing. It's not that hard, especially people don't even get consulted. As people don't even know about it, because we cannot do that. We cannot talk to 150,000 people, So we have to be responsible. To be responsible is we need to make sure we have provisions I support the purpose, intent of getting money to do those things. It's fine. But it's short-term problem we're facing. At least that's what we heard. I heard that, short-term problem, because the last few years. But at the same time, our budget's gone up. So it's not because we have less money. We have more money to spend, but we just have more problems. Okay, let's solve the problem. The problem is not getting more money. The problem is let's spend the money where it really counts. Okay? Because if we don't do that, we cannot sustain it. Eventually, people are not going to have money to do it. So we heard the state people in the state of Washington are concerned about state income tax. Every time you mention about raising tax, people go crazy. So people don't know that. People think, wow, we're just fix this and fix that. But we cannot do that. So I really believe to do this right, we got to listen to the people that have spoken, from campus development to individual taxpayers. How and what are we going to spend the money on? Have a plan, projects.
Okay.
Vic Bishop said the same thing. So it's everyone. So we heard enough, but if we are not sure, let's talk to more people, and we're going to hear very clearly. And I, being on the council, being always insistent, if I don't know how I'm going to spend money, I'm opposing to it. So I don't know. Thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, followed by Councilmember Stokes.
Thank you, Mayor. I applaud staff bringing this forward. I think it's, as you shared with us previously, a way to raise additional revenue for the deferred maintenance during COVID, especially. But and most likely, I would think that one of the biggest reasons to doing this is that the more that we can maintain our citywide infrastructure, probably end up saving us money in the long run versus only maintaining it or replacing it. This conversation also then you start thinking about what other possibilities or what else can we do as well to look at this shortfall. But I really appreciate all the comments this evening from residents and businesses alike. I think the other thing that we have to consider here is that next year, the year after that, our expenses at this city will outpace our revenue. So I don't think this is a short-term situation. I think we're going to be impacted, even with revenues coming back post-COVID. I still think this is going to be an ongoing issue for many years. So I think having something like this in our back pocket could help us, again, long-term, saving us money by addressing maintenance now versus waiting and waiting and waiting. Not to mention just the sheer issues that it might create in the short term in terms of mobility, or just how our city looks. Having said that, I think that when we first looked at raising the B&O taxes, one of the first things that we did was we went to all the major companies, all the major businesses in Bellevue. I think that we should take a bit of a similar approach here. I think we still need buy-in from residents of this city, which I think we have clearly heard. So I think it's great that we're going to the chamber and the BDA, but for me, especially as a marketing guy, my first thing would be to go to the residents with this. So I would, and I feel like a broken record because the city manager has heard me talk about this many times, but for me, in order to get to as many residents as possible would be the neighborhood associations, reach out to them directly, set up meetings, because I think a lot of them will understand why we have this need, why it's important to do, and I think once they fully understand what that need is, I think they'll get behind it. But at this point right now, I think there's a lot of confusion, and that's not necessarily anyone's at fault. It's just I think there's just a little bit more time that needs to be spent just reaching out to the residents. I think we're clearly hearing that. But again, I've mentioned this before. I just think it should be part of our ongoing process that neighborhood associations that we have in this city are one of the strongest levers that we can pull to get out information, and I think we need to make use of them a little bit more. I know we have our newspaper, and we can ask people to sign up for email alerts, et cetera, but too often still, I think people are being surprised by, and I'm just not talking about this, I'm talking about just in general terms. We just still need to improve some of our communication to our residents, and that's not directed at anybody. That's just ongoing improvement as a city to make sure that everyone just understands what's happening and how it can impact them. So those are my thoughts, and look forward to hearing more from my colleagues. Thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I appreciate the Deputy Mayor's comments on this, and I think this is a resolution for some issues we have on getting things done for the community, for the city, for transportation, and when we look at this, we're talking about things that people are concerned about. They want to have streets, they want to have them safe, they want to have, they don't want potholes, they won't all these other things. So we're doing that, and it's just and the growth has been tremendous here. And we're working to enhance the neighborhoods. When we go in and put in new roads and put in these type of things, you have to pay money for it. And our tax system is not a very friendly one for people who really can't afford very much. So it's a difficult thing we're in to that extent. But these are, and this is not something that we're setting out to do X number of dollars every year at this point. It's a mechanism to have funding when we need it to do things. We have to catch up on some things. But we also hear from neighborhood associations and individuals about, why haven't you done something to my street? Why haven't you done this? Why don't you have better signage? Why don't you have better lights and all? So it's not things that we're doing that's frivolous or not needed. These are things we really need, and particularly as the city grows. But the issue is, how do we do it responsibly? And this apparently, and we're all learning about this because we haven't done this, but the TBD is a mechanism to do this in a way that's really more responsible and more directed. So I think, and yes, we need to get out and talk to people. We have 150,000 people. We get maybe 5 or 6 or 7 people who come down and talk to us about this, and that is very helpful. I wish we could get more people directly. But the fact of the matter is, people do hear this, but they only it's just complicated, you know that. And I agree, we need to do more outreach. And we're not setting this up so that we're saying, we're going to do this and we're going to tax this amount and put, like $10 million next year. We're looking at how we do this in a responsible way, is my understanding of this. And I think it's just, it gives us another tool. And it's been used by a lot of cities. This isn't something we've invented. We've looked at this very carefully, and it's a very good mechanism. In fact, my understanding is in some ways it gives us a better handle over spending and utilization of funding to do it this way, and something that gets us that we can have a better handle on what we need to do to keep the system going better. Is that what your understanding is and feeling about this? Because there's a benefit for doing this that helps us as a city, and I think that's what's important.
What was the question?
Well, the question is, this is a good system to help us to actually utilize funding in a more responsible way, a way that's more targeted and at a certain, not having to go through a lot of processes to get to that at a certain point.
Maybe we could ask staff to explain why you choose to recommend this method of raising funding for this as opposed to any other.
Yeah, the first part is really the maintenance shortfall that we're in deferred maintenance. If we continue that, it'll just grow and keep growing. So there's a need now. If that doesn't happen, sometime soon, people are really going to start noticing some real differences. And with regard to the programmatic CIP items that we're talking about, which address maintenance, we've got lists that you wouldn't believe of needs that have been out there for a long time. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. It would just help us get to some of those things like sidewalk improvements and everything a little faster with the balance. But the most important thing really is the maintenance aspects of it.
Great.
If I might add one moment of clarification as well, which is this is one of the few revenue sources that comes with it a requirement for accountability that does require annual reporting associated with it. And it does come with a specific limitation of transportation only, and it must be within whatever transportation plan or program that is designated. So it has very specific parameters around it and accountability associated.
Yeah, thank you for emphasizing that. Councilmember Barksdale, are you good? You want to say something?
I was just going to make a brief comment.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, I support moving forward with the formation. I think this is a stepwise approach intentionally to address the very questions that we're hearing. So I think the legislature thought about that and thought about the need to make sure that there was input on every step of the way. So in terms of the formation, I hear all the questions about funding and how, things are going to get funded, where and the amount and so forth. Perfect questions for a later point as we're moving forward with the formation.
So I'm hearing, generalized support for moving forward with the formation, knowing that we're going to have a discussion on whether to activate it, and if so, what type of funding we would be trying to generate. But I also see a lot of support for increased public outreach. I heard a request to engage with our neighborhood programs. So I think that's good feedback.
Yeah, we've got time over the summer to design that level of outreach.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and make a motion.
Mayor, can I ask one question
Yes.
before we do? Thank you. So this evening, I just want to be just clear on what we're voting on, is that we're just voting on the formation of this. Would we have another vote to actually activate it then?
Yes.
Would that be, okay.
Yeah,
And a
tonight's the
process.
public
And a
hearing.
process,
A
okay.
large process.
Yeah.
We'll be bringing the ordinance back next week. and
Okay.
Then
Do you want to bring the
next step is-
timeline up again where it shows that, so we can all see it
Do you have
again? I don't know how hard that's going to be, but.
And while that timeline is coming up, there are multiple bites. The first is the formation.
Right.
The second is the assumption of the district into the city so that you could act as a city council instead of a separate district. And then you would define how you would look at appropriation, identification and appropriation of any funds, which could be via a normal budget process where you're acting in that regular function.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so here's the timeline for everybody to see. Okay, one quick question from you.
I heard that we will have time to discuss how to spend the money. But I think that we heard enough that, we need to have the problem for me is devil is in the detail.
Okay, hold on. I'm going
Yeah.
to stop you right here.
Yeah.
We are only talking about the formation. We're not talking about anything about what we're going to do with it, whether we're going to
We heard
activate
that
it. We're not talking
formation
about
is
that tonight.
linking to the sales tax.
We don't know
Spending,
that.
How do we spend
No,
is linked.
Conrad, we're
It's
not,
linked.
we haven't made that decision. We haven't even discussed it. It's a
But
possibility.
that's what we heard.
So I'm going to ask for a motion.
Certainly, Mayor. I move to direct staff to finalize the associated ordinance for adoption at a future meeting.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I oppose.
Okay, and I will ask that you maybe work with staff to get all the information that you need
I
as we
will.
move through the
I will.
process.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. We'll get back here at 10 till. Okay. So, Mr. Miyake, very excited for this next study session item. We have, do we have one or two items?
have three items this evening,
Three
Mayor.
items coming up. So this is the first one.
Yes, Mayor, and thank you for teeing that up. It's an informational presentation tonight on King County's proposed Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services levy renewal. And just by way of background, this levy will appear on the August 1st ballot. Tonight's presentation is informational only, and Council then will have a chance to ask questions once we hear a presentation. Joining us at the table are Lacey Jane Wolf, our Assistant Director of Intergovernment Relationship, who's sitting in the middle. To her left is Helena Stevens, Equity and Regional Policy Advisor from the Manager's Office. And to Genesee's right is Leon Richardson, the Director of the King County Adult Services. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Lacey.
Thanks, Brad. I know you all are pressed for time tonight, so I'm going to hand things right over to Leon.
Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm going to go through these slides relatively quick, and then I'll try to afford the maximum time for Q&A. So the Veteran Seniors and Human Services Levy is on the ballot, and the Executive and Council adopted to renew the VSHSL at a 10-cent rate, which is what it currently is on the ballot. Or excuse me, it is currently in this iteration of the levy. Through the property taxes, we project right now that we will achieve additional revenue somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million, which is $564 million. This is a bit of a moving target for us as we continue to get property tax assessments over the next few months. You see in the lower right-hand corner the current breakdown of the Veteran, Seniors, and Human Services Levy in terms of funding buckets. So to date, right now, the levy is currently structured in three funding buckets, which we define as populations: seniors, veterans, and resilient communities. What's currently before you on the ballot, or August 1st on the ballot, will be the addition of a new 10% area. That 10% is regional impact initiatives. And we put this in part due to community feedback. Some things don't neatly fit into a population and are more cross-cutting. And so that's how the regional impact initiatives emerged. So talking briefly about the populations, veterans, I'm a veteran myself, and one of the things that prides me about veteran service members and their families is it's a very inclusive definition compared to what you see on the federal side. So through the VSHSL, we define a veteran as 1 day of service in the armed forces. So one day of service, regardless of discharge status, you and your family can qualify for these resources. Older adults and their caregivers, the definition change there, or not change, but difference from what you typically see, is 55 and older is how we classify veterans. And then other resilient communities is the human services, the broad human services that you get from the title. So veterans, seniors, and then human services. The resilient communities is more of the catch net for all of the other human services that the levy offers. To the right of that, you see the result areas that all of our strategies are captured in. And the important highlight is also that, as the city manager stated, August 1st is when this hits the ballot, and this will be the 4th time that the levy has gone to the ballot. The previous 3 times it's been passed, and in this last iteration of the levy passing is when seniors was included into the expansion of the levy. So now just talking about what the levy has accomplished. One of the things that I'm very prideful about is that this current levy funds over 150 contracted partners. That translates to over 300 programs. That's because many of our contracted partners run more than one program with us. As we guide through the next couple slides, this is just going to share some of the highlights of this levy. One of the things I want to point out is in this levy, as we talked about all of those contracted partners, 1/3 of those are small organizations. That small organization is less than 20 staff, less than a $4 million budget. Of those small organizations, greater than 50% of them needed to get technical assistance in order to apply. One of the things that we found is that many small organizations didn't have the staff, the experience to write the applications, respond to the RFPs, to be competitive for our procurements. And so we were very intentional about setting up technical assistance to enable small organizations, grassroots organizations that are closest to where the need is, that are directly responsive to our community, to be able to be competitive. And we saw great success in that. Additionally, what I want to highlight is that as we do our RFPs, one of the things that we ask for from our partners is where are you going to serve? Where are you geographically showing up? And so as we look across the totality of the programs we have through the VSHSL, 75% of those programs provide county-wide services. The next couple slides highlight our results-based accountability. So I know accountability comes up a lot, and one of the things that we try to intentionally do is through a performance measurement and evaluation team that we have, make sure that we are creating performance plans for most of our contracts, and then also have meaningful engagement through our contract managers with all of our partners. And that engagement can happen monthly, can happen quarterly. It varies depending on size of contract and, frankly, need for engagement. One of the things that we've learned over the years is in the results-based accountability, it's not just about providing the service to a person and having a case manager say, success, we did the thing. But it's also when that person walks out of the office or from whatever place where they're receiving those direct services, do they feel like they gained the thing that they need to thrive, to be successful? And so for us, it's engaging with the community, getting that feedback to say, did we hit the mark? Did we get this right? And so that's a lot of what we try to do in terms of our performance measurement, in addition to understanding where we have gaps in the system and working to correct those. When we talk community engagement, as far as this levy and then implementation planning, which is where we're at right now, the slide before you reflects a lot of the community engagement we've done over the past few months. We really went out to the community because we wanted to hear where did we get it right and where did we get it wrong. We wanted to get feedback on what the next levy could potentially look like if renewed. And so this just illustrates all the different engagements my team and I showed up in the various fashions. So it was very exciting to hear Plymouth Crossing discussed earlier. So that is something that some Veteran Seniors and Human Services Levy funding contributed to. There's the Congregation for the Homeless Shelter that's right across from that, that received a substantial amount of levy funding as well. And then there's a Woman and Family Shelter, I think that's in Kirkland, that received a substantial amount of levy funding and is my team tells me is the only like family shelter on the east side. And so one of the things that we look for in the levy, and that I think is one of the pillars of the levy, is being the system connector, understanding where we have gaps and working to fill those gaps, partnering with the local, state, and federal resources to make sure that we have a truly interconnected system in that respect. An example of that, which we'll talk about here a little bit later, but is the reducing veterans homelessness by 40%. That was truly a community effort, and we had a first in the nation veterans pilot called Collaborative Case Management, which directly contributed to that. Another thing we'll talk about later is expanding our investment in the human service workforce. One of the lessons learned we saw this levy is that, especially due to the pandemic, there was a retention problem in our human service workforce. The wage inequity there for what we were expecting of that workforce wasn't comparable, and we need to course correct. And so that is highlighting our very intentional focus on beginning to right that ship in the future. So I'm going to go out and just say that we have the best veterans program in the country, county-run veterans program in the country. I think the examples of that I was just talking about, the collaborative case management, we started that. That was a program that we partnered with the King County Housing Authority. We partnered with the federal VA. The secretary of the VA had to sign off on it, and where we have housing vouchers that we are responsible for and we directly serve the community with. One of the team members was telling me a story about a woman veteran with her 2 kids that were living in a car. They had been living in their car for a month. They didn't meet the threshold for a traditional VA HUD-VASH voucher for veterans. And then through this program, we were able to get them housed and moved into an apartment. And that is just one of countless stories where we've been able to serve people that would have otherwise been gone unserved. Moving on to doubling our investment in senior centers. So if you didn't know, right now the Veteran Seniors and Human Services Levy funds 39 senior centers across King County. This has been an exciting and I would say life-changing endeavor, and I would encourage any of you to talk to the senior centers if you want to get more direct feedback on that. But personal observation from me was during the pandemic, I got to see firsthand the senior centers step up in ways that I never even imagined. Collectively, they were holding weekly calls, talking to each other, collaborating, delivered thousands of meals to people's homes because they couldn't come into congregate settings. and then took majority of their programs virtually and figured out how to not only take their programs virtually, but then educate everybody on how to be virtual at the same time. So it's just been, it was truly a remarkable endeavor to see how the senior programs came together as a team and then migrated their services and continued to adapt. No workforce, no results. So in just looking at the levy and looking at our results-based accountability, we had some instances where we were partnering with our partners, and we were like, hey, we're seeing your numbers drop. Why is that? Or your service is going down. What's going on? And then through that dialogue, we found that it was hard to retain staff. Or by the time you hire staff and get them trained, they're moving on to something else. And then when we peel the layers back of that, what we found is that our wages across the human service workforce aren't as competitive as they need to be in other places. And so wage equity, and there's the study there with the link that UW did, but there's a lot of data coming out right now around wage equity and the work we need to do, I think, as a community to right that. And in a renewed levy, the VSHSL is going to very intentionally focus on this. So overarching, here's our timeline. We're in that July block to the far right. August is the election, and just due to the timing of things, my team and I were working on drafting implementation plans. So assuming that the levy is renewed, we can get something before King County Council to allow us to continue to operate the levy into 2024. Those are just some ways to stay connected. I would encourage you all and anybody in the audience that is interested. Those are our various social media platforms where we post updates. Thank you for your time. I know I rushed through that, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. You know what? I'm going to indulge myself and I'll start first. I'll be quick. I have two questions. One is, are there any plans to put King County Veterans Program sites on the east side? And two, how does the state's long-term care program that they're deducting from paychecks now to cover, how does that mesh with the care program that you have for caregivers?
So in terms of veterans facilities or operations on the east side, one thing that we did change in this levy is one of our King County Veterans offices was located in downtown Seattle. We got a lot of feedback that was hard to get to. We moved that office to Northgate along the light rail and free parking. So we have that location there. Myself and our veterans administrator, Megan Stanley, who's sitting right behind me, and as a part of my team, we are constantly talking and looking at opportunities to get more of a presence on the east side. There's the potential in a renewed levy to have that be physical in nature in terms of a location or a partnership with one of our many contracted partners, and that of having our, we call them social service professionals, but social workers essentially, case managers, come to the east side at various locations. All that to say, that's something we are constantly exploring of how do we get more of a presence. But even right now, our team does job fairs, our team does come out to the east side, just it's more event driven in that respect.
I'm sure our staff would be happy to talk with you about encouraging you to have a center on the east side.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how about the long-term care payroll deduction that's happening, and how does that program compare to what you're doing with the long-term care caregivers?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask my team to take that one down as a note. We
Okay.
haven't done that analysis to crosswalk that particular thing with the levies work, but I will follow up with you on that particular
Great.
question.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Stokes?
Yeah, appreciate this very much. It was, has been a pleasure to not only work on this and the one before, to, get this in place and all, and we're excited that we had it work through this. And appreciate your acknowledging and think we're working real hard on our efforts that are connected here in Bellevue on the east side, and I think that's a great thing that has kind of blossomed out from the past. We're, I think, well, you missed it on here. There was we would be, as we said, be interested in talking to you about facilities here and how we can connect more in this area, and tie it in with, as we're talking about the new facility, have our homeless housing facilities, or the men's shelter, support for, these things that are connected with it, and there are veterans involved in that, and others, and elderly people. So I think it's we've made a long strides in being a lot more collaborative and working together as a region on that, and I think that's something that came out of this last time, which is very good. So really, we can't say very much on a lot of this, but I just want to appreciate your involvement and the team's work on this, and looking forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here and helping explain all of this. I did have a couple of questions I wanted to understand. One is on the human services workforce and expanding investments. You talked about that. So I'm wondering if you can comment a bit more about, so there's intentionality within the funds in the levy to actually raise the wages of the very folks that are providing the human services, or is it investment to grow the pipeline of workers that want to go into that field? So that's one of my questions. The other one is there's, for seniors, it says older adults and caregivers. So is there funding in there related to caregivers of seniors? And is that also tied to, there was a slide about increased engagement in community and feelings of connection. And certainly we know that seniors in our community can feel very isolated. And so I wanted to understand a little bit more about what that is. And then lastly, on I saw information in here about domestic violence hotline and gender-based violence survivors, but more broadly related to violence prevention strategies that are a little broader than domestic violence. I mean, I would say that we're certainly seeing more violence in our community, unsolicited violence. It seems like there's more of this mental health issues that may be creating some more violence just to strangers. And I just wondered if you could comment about that. So those are my three questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try my best to hit all of those things, and if I leave something out, please let me know. So one of the things that we are looking at in a future levy is how we contract with partners, ensuring that we are building in inflation into contracts to afford our partners the ability to grow as inflation grows in our community. Another thing that we are working on is really partnering with the community to say, don't fall into the trap of doing what traditional organizations do when they're applying for government funds, which is to say, we're going to do the most amount of work for the least amount of money. Like, we want to know what the true cost of doing business is, what it's actually going to take to get the thing done, and then that's what we want to strive to fund. And so part of it is overcoming the systemic barrier of we need to say that we're going to do as much for as little And that's the only way we're going to get the funding and changing that mindset. Additionally to that, and this is part of where I would say what we plan to propose, because the executive still has to endorse, and then council, King County Council still has to adopt a future implementation plan. We do envision having a strategy in there that very intently focuses on workforce and how we can work to stabilize the wage inequity within our nonprofit sector. The other piece of that question is, when we talk about caregivers, one of the things that we found in this levy is that there's just not enough caregivers out there. And there's a workforce shortage in caregivers. And so one of the things that we're looking at in a potential strategy is from a workforce development perspective of, like, what does it look like to very intently go after workforce strategies to help create a larger workforce pool for caregivers. And so it's really both ends of the spectrum along the workforce side of the wage inequity, addressing that, and then recognizing where we have gaps in the workforce and seeing what we can do to mitigate that as well. In terms of the increased engagement with community, one of the things I did, I want to say roughly a year ago now, is I reorganized my division within DCHS. I reorganized that division to have a policy and community engagement team, because the feedback that we got is that we weren't engaging with community enough, and that some of the hard feedback I got was, you only show up when you have something to tell us or when you need something. And you know, that was very eye-opening to us. And so part of our restructure is because we wanted to more intently show up not only with our local governments, but with all of our community partners to understand what is that evolving need and how can we be directly, timely responsive to that. Lastly, the violence prevention. And so we have a gun violence prevention strategy. We have funding around elder abuse prevention team that's funded through the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and then some of the other programs that you've listed, and that of our gender-based violence prevention programs. And so that really captures like our violence prevention work. I know that there's other parts of our department that focus on prevention work that if there's additional questions, we can absolutely take those and provide an email response. But our gun violence prevention work is managed as a county through our public health department. And so the funding that we have for that through the levy, this iteration of the levy, passes through us to public health. So we're not being unintentionally duplicative. We're focusing our efforts in that way. And I can say in a renewed levy, the plan is for a gun prevention strategy to be there as well. And our intent would be the same, to pass that money from DCHS to public health so that we are running one prevention program in that respect.
So I guess to Mayor's point earlier, these programs are also going to be on the east side and in Bellevue, because King County is a really big place, and just wanted to make sure that there was going to be equity amongst the programs too.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we very intently look at is geographic distribution of services. And that goes back to my point of 75% of the programs that we have contracted say that they provide services across King County. Now, where I would say my policy and community engagement team comes in is with community and with local government to say, hey, there's a need here or wherever, and it's not being met. And then it's for us to say, like, do we have a contract in place that can be responsive to that? Or is that a gap that we need to look at in the future to be responsive to?
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Great overview this evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to come down and educate us on this. And a lot of great questions already from my colleagues, and we're running a little late, so I'll just keep it to one. And it goes back to the important things that you mentioned already about workforce. And I'm just curious if you are tracking at all those individuals in human services that we lose due to wage inequity issues. I don't know if that is something you are able to track, or that's something that the agencies or nonprofits that you work, or partners that you work with, are able to track that. And then on top of that, I think it was on slide 6, the 675 bonuses. I'm just kind of curious for both hiring and retaining, I believe. How effective was that in terms of maintaining that workforce? And what was the average size of those bonuses? I'm just curious as I guess the dollar amount, but also how effective was it?
Yeah, so on the first piece of that, Deputy Mayor, so workforce, we have looked at the total number of staff this year that across all of our contracts that are actually employed by the levy. And so that roughly came out to just over, I want to say, 500 employees across the county. When you talk about wage inequity and retention, we don't have a good statistic on that, but I'll say if you look at the UW work that was in that link, I believe that's extensive work that they had done there, and there's some good figures there. But what I can tell you is more of the visual lens of that, and from our contract managers, that there is a pretty healthy turnover rate, especially amongst our smaller organizations, based off of the wage. And so that is absolutely there. And where that most shows up is, I would say, with our direct service workers. And so it's not necessarily with the person that's in the office or, the admin staff, for say. It's those that are, working in the shelters, working as case managers, those in the trenches, so to speak, doing that work. I apologize. What was the second part of your question?
I'm just curious. So the 675 bonuses for retaining and hiring, what was the average bonus for folks?
Yeah, $2,000 bonuses. So we had underspend and various strategies, and one of our process that we go through annually is to identify underspend and propose how to reallocate those dollars. And so given that when this all came up, we collectively came up with the idea to provide retention and hiring bonuses. We think it was pretty effective. You saw the number of organizations that were served, but also through our analysis and our conversations with partners, it's a short time solution. It's really a Band-Aid approach is what we found. And so looking to try and find out what that more long-term systemic approach is.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you for your presentation. Talking about Bellevue, I think we have a veteran low-income housing near Victoria under St. Margaret's Episcopal Church.
Andrews Glen.
It's called St. Andrews
Andrews Glen.
Glen, or something. St. Andrews Housing. It runs very well, very nice, great program working. So thank you. My question would be, how are resilient communities defined within the levy?
Thank you for that question, Council Member. So I'm going to read it just because it's a definition. I don't want to get it wrong. Person or community susceptible to reduced health, housing, financial, or social stability outcomes due to systemic and historical exposure to trauma, violence, poverty, isolation, bias, racism, stigma, discrimination, disability, or chronic illness. And so really it's I would say, a very broad definition and really speaks to that human service component of the VSHSL and the catch-all there. And so as an example, like our gender-based violence prevention programs show up underneath resilient communities in a big way.
Very good. So it would be broad and inclusive.
Yes.
So rather than the gatekeeper, would be door opener.
We strive to find a way to get to the yes.
Encourager.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for being here. So the levy invests in both short-term housing or shelters, for as an example, and long-term housing like permanent supportive housing. Are those equal in terms of the investment that they receive, or is one prioritized over the other?
So at the county, we believe in a housing first model, and so our investments in permanent supportive housing significantly overall outweigh our investments into shelter. We invest into both, but just from a total dollar amount, the investment is higher, especially when you factor in, like in this iteration of the levy, the capital dollars associated with operation dollars as well.
Everybody good with that? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Miyake, what's our next study session
Sure.
item?
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. Our next study session topic relate to Bellevue Code amendments to the Environmental Procedures Code and Transportation Development Codes regarding state environmental policy exempt levels and transportation standards. Just by way of background, at the January 17, 2023 meeting earlier this year, Council initiated 2 city code amendments as part of the next right work planning effort to simplify and streamline permitting processes. After the presentation, staff are seeking council direction to prepare the Environmental Procedures Code and Transportation Development Code amendments for final action at a future council meeting. At the table, joining us this evening are Nick Whipple, Code and Policy Manager from the Development Services Department, as well as Molly Johnson, Development Review Manager from the Transportation Department.
So I just want to clarify, we've
Yes.
got 2 separate things here that are going to be dealt with separately, correct?
Both of them in this particular study session topic.
Yes.
2 items,
Yes.
the Environmental Procedures Code and the Transportation Development Code.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Nick and he could further clarify.
Great, thank you. And good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, members of the council. As you are noting, Mayor Robinson, this is kind of a 2-for-1. So we've got 2 code amendments that we're bringing forward as a proposal under one study session. And if directed by council, we'll bring them back separately as 2 different actions under other ordinances and resolutions or consent calendar, whatever you wish. So for tonight's direction, to restate that, it's looking to get direction from you all to have staff prepare the Environmental Procedures Code, Bellevue City Code Amendment, and the Transportation Development Code, Bellevue City Code Amendment for final action at a future meeting. For our agenda this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about Next Right Work, where these 2 code amendments are stemming from. We'll talk about the January 17th council direction, and then we'll separate this into a part 1, part 2. So part 1 being the Environmental Procedures Code Amendment, part 2, the Transportation Development Code Amendment. Molly Johnson will speak to that item, and then we'll close with an ask for direction. So with the Next Right Work background, the Next Right Work really builds upon the 2017 Affordable Housing Strategy. Just about a year ago, you all selected 5 items to be completed in the next 12 to 18 months. So this is sort of a progress report here. The green checks are marking where we have had council action on these items. The yellow checks are where we're making progress. They've had study session with you. You'll hear about reduced fees tonight. The ADU reform, Luca, is coming back next Monday for action. And then tonight, really, we're focusing on the item that you initiated around simplifying the permitting process and expediting permitting for affordable housing projects. And that really has two code amendments that involve a council decision. So on January 17th, staff had brought forward a proposal on how we might simplify the permitting process, as well as expedite permitting for affordable housing projects in coordination with other ongoing projects. So with that January 17th meeting, we had brought forward internal process improvement pilots that would be specific to affordable housing. Those are underway. We have a team in our land use division within development services that was created for affordable housing and special projects to help respond to this action for internal process improvement pilots. And we'd also be looking for ways to broaden that out to other housing types or development types at a future date. And then for tonight, we're focused now on the code amendments that aim to simplify the permitting process for housing as well as mixed-use development in the city. So the two code amendments are one to maximize the SEPA categorical exemptions, and then the second code amendment is to align some of the previous council decision around unit lot subdivisions with some amendments to our transportation development code. So I'll start out with part one of the Environmental Procedures Code, which is really just to maximize our SEPA categorical exemptions. So a little background on SEPA, the State Environmental Policy Act. It was enacted in 1971. Since then, since SEPA has become law, many other state laws have been passed, which required jurisdictions to enact regulations that serve the same purpose as SEPA or intend to protect the environment, including the Shoreline Management Act, which was passed in 1972, which requires all counties, towns, and cities to prepare and implement shoreline master programs, stormwater regulations, and permitting, which implements requirements under the Clean Air Act, or Clean Water Act, rather. In addition, the Growth Management Act was passed in 1991, which of course has a charge in there to protect critical areas. And then additionally, the Local Project Review Act, which outlines a substantial amount of requirements for community, tribal, and local, state, and federal engagement during policy, code, and permitting processes. All that to say, SEPA is not the only tool that we have available to us any longer to protect the environment or to engage with the community. In the State Environmental Policy Act, there are a number of exemptions for permits and actions that would remove projects from SEPA review. There are flexible thresholds that can be increased by local governments. And so tonight we are discussing how we might increase some of those flexible exemption levels. So SEPA is commonly a gap filler for a lot of jurisdictions that don't have robust codes like Bellevue does. The city and the region, as well as the state and federal governments, have adopted regulations that cover many of the elements in SEPA. So we have natural environment elements as well as built environment elements. And when a community can demonstrate that and document that you have coverage in protecting these various elements, then you are able to raise those exemption levels. So there are many regulations that apply to development projects in the city. With the federal level having its own regulations, the state and the region as well. And then the city of Bellevue has also, our codes have advanced to such a degree that we have pretty good coverage in terms of protecting the environment. So with that, we are proposing to adopt higher thresholds. And adopting higher thresholds would mean that projects would not be subject to SEPA review or complete a SEPA checklist, and Bellevue would not need to issue a threshold determination. So this isn't to say that these projects would not go through any review. We will still have all of our other review processes in place. We'll have all of our codes in place that we would apply to these projects. What this is eliminating is the need for an environmental checklist. And it would help simplify and streamline the permit process to further encourage residential or mixed-use development projects in the city. Reducing the permit timelines, some of the outcomes here are to reduce those timelines, which would lower development costs. Also looking to eliminate some of our redundant processes. As noted earlier, there are other ways that we have public outreach. There's other kind of protections for the environment, and so this would just remove some of those redundant processes. And then the exemption, just to note, would not eliminate proposals or decisions that involve a project on lands covered by waters or a rezone. So to note our process for this, council initiated this code amendment on January 17th, at which point we began our public outreach. To amend our environmental procedures code, there is a state requirement that we have a 60-day comment period. That was initiated 2 weeks ago on June 29th. We are here tonight for a discussion with council. And the end of the comment period will be on August 29th, and that's the soonest we can bring something back for action would be after the close of that comment period. So that is the Environmental Procedures Code Amendment. Mayor, if you'd like, we can move on to part 2.
I think I'll stop here and
Okay.
just see if there's any questions.
Sure.
Are there any questions on that part? And I have one question, and Janice has a question, so go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to, I believe that the Chamber's comments earlier this evening addresses this section of your presentation. In terms of the number, if I have this right, but if I don't, please correct me, about the number of units that would be exempt from SEPA review or from the environmental list. So you're recommending this evening this max exemption threshold, but is there a bill that actually even further exempts the number of units? Could you please just clarify that for me? Because I found her comments rather interesting and I had not heard that yet.
Sure. Yes, so the comment that we heard earlier, I believe, mentioned Senate Bill 5412, which was passed into law this past year. From my understanding, one of the main kind of distinctions between what we're proposing today and what that Senate bill would allow is the categorical exemptions that we're raising to is 200 units. And I believe that the Senate Bill 5412, it has a lot more documentation requirements associated with it, and that could potentially allow a limitless amount of units that could be exempt. So we are still determining what implementation steps we might want to take in response to that recently passed legislation. This, of course, was initiated by you all before that was effective. But that is, in my understanding, the key difference there.
So if I decipher what you're saying to me, then you feel comfortable making the recommendation of 200 units, but that we might look further later on about increasing to 500 once we've gotten into the bill a little bit more and the impact to the city, and would that be a fair statement, or?
I think that's a fair statement. It's pretty soon after it was enacted, so we are looking at those implementation steps and looking to see how we might be able to take advantage of that.
Would it make sense for us to pause at this point and take a harder look at that and implement that now versus waiting?
It is a good question. The documentation requirements, again, we'd have to look to Senate Bill 5412.
Okay.
But they are pretty extensive, and there are other kind of environmental review processes underway with the periodic update as well.
Okay.
Trying to figure out what we might be able to glean from that process to see if it sets us up for 5412, but that is still to be determined.
Okay.
But we would recommend moving forward, though, since with this proposal. Since we have initiated the comment period with it, we've also done kind of that inventory and the necessary steps that are required to be able to raise to the 200 units at this time.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate the thoroughness of the information that you provided. You know, to me, I think that you help us understand that since the SEPA was put in place in the early 1970s, many other regulations have been put in place at federal, state, local levels as well. So I appreciate the thoroughness of the 6 pages in the attachment that talks about all of the different things that we look at, because I think it's important for us to understand that we're not talking about removing key provisions that protect our air, water, quality of life. It is removing redundant processes that already exist within all of the codes that are in that 6-page document. Is that correct? I just wanted to make sure that that was correct, because I feel like what we're really saying is that we have a belt and suspenders and bubble wrap, and really what we're removing is the bubble wrap that's not adding any more to making sure that we are making prudent decisions. I might suggest that, especially in light of the discussion around public process and community engagement, that we may want to consider in that attachment of the 6 pages, adding a column that says of all of these provisions, which one actually has public engagement and public comments required, so that when we take a look at that in the future, we have that as information. And then I would be interested in moving forward with this now, but perhaps look at this as a phase 1, phase 2, where phase 2 might be looking at that 5412, because I was glancing at it a little bit when we were at break, and it sounds like there is a lot of requirements in order for us to expand the categorical exemption, but it does seem like it would be prudent for us to at least take a look to see if what those steps might look like and what might make sense. But I wouldn't want to hold up this particular part right now, so I'm prepared to move forward with it. But thank you for that.
Okay, so I just wanted a clarification from slide 10, if we could go to slide 10. Just the outcomes, one of the outcomes is encouraging, further encouraging housing. Am I conflating things? But I mean, how does raising the threshold on agricultural structures encourage housing?
So the state does have flexible thresholds. So when we are looking to raise flexible thresholds around housing and mixed-use development, we're also looking at what other flexible thresholds that they have in place. And when we begin documenting how we have coverage, it makes sense from our perspective to also look at the agricultural structures as well as the commercial, school, office, recreational category 2. All to aim at streamlining the permit process, both for housing as well as some commercial development. By streamlining that process, at least some of the thinking is that you are freeing up the staff time in some ways to focus on other housing projects by removing some of those added processes, which sort of further expedites some of the permitting process in the city.
So it's not really direct, it's just you.
I would say agricultural structures are not a direct connection to affordable housing. That is absolutely correct.
Just wanted to clarify that. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, great. All right, let's move on. Thank you.
Okay, Molly.
So let's talk about the transportation code change that we're asking for, which is part 2 here. We're looking at a relatively small change to the code, but it'll make a big difference in how we can implement standards and improve the unit lot subdivision is what's the direction in, I forgot when, January? Previous direction. How do I change this?
Right here.
There we go. So when the unit lot subdivision ordinance was adopted in 2021, it changed the land use code, but it didn't look at the transportation code to see if we had the right standards that went with unit lot subdivisions. What it did was it took, essentially was a townhouse development and allowed it to be subdivided into what are individual lots for each dwelling unit. So like a condominium development that we would have already reviewed and approved as a condominium could now be a subdivision. When we look at the transportation code, there's very specific subdivision requirements for transportation facilities and that, and these are pretty robust. So here's an example. We'd have lots of sidewalk, wide roads, parking on the street, planter strips, et cetera. Those work really well for a traditional subdivision, but they really aren't what we were looking at for the unit lot style subdivision. What we didn't want to do was have this one-size-fits-all subdivision requirement, because it really doesn't work for what the appropriate facilities are for the different types of subdivisions. So what we did was look at what are the types of facilities that we typically require for a subdivision. They're much more compact. There's plenty of access for sidewalks and pedestrians, but just enough for vehicles. So we wanted to be able to use these same types of facilities for the unit lot subdivision, the condo, the PUD, all those types of developments that were similar. We wanted to have the flexibility to do that. And so if we do make the code change that we're proposing, what that does is it eliminates this barrier to provide these really robust public roads, and it allows us to come back with these more compact type standards. It allows a director to put into the transportation code the more appropriate standards to use in this type of development. So then they all look the same. So our approval process is much simpler than the one Nick described before. It's very straightforward. We just ask you to direct us to come back with the code change.
Okay, so then with that, Mayor, we are seeking direction to prepare the Environmental Procedures Code amendment as well as the Transportation Development Code amendment for final action at a future meeting. We'll turn it back to you.
Okay, any questions on the transportation aspect of this affecting the townhomes? Okay, is there a motion?
There is, Mayor. I move the direct staff to prepare the Environmental Procedures Code, BCCA, and Transportation Development Code, BCCA, for final council action at a future meeting.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So the next item I'm actually going to recuse myself for, and because it has to do with some work that my husband has worked on. And so I'm going to recuse myself for the rest of the meeting. Following this presentation, we have an executive session, and then our meeting will be adjourned after that. So I'm going to hand the gavel over to the deputy mayor. Give me a second as I pack up here. Should have thought ahead.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council
Good evening,
members.
please.
So our last item this evening, staff are returning to council with additional details for the proposed permit review and inspection fee reduction program for affordable housing. Just by way of background, council initiated this work in December 12th of 2022. As part of tonight's presentation, staff will review some of the responses to questions that were asked at that December meeting. After the presentation, staff are seeking council direction to prepare a permit review and inspection fee reduction ordinance for final action at future meeting. So joining us this evening is Nick Whipple again, Code and Policy Manager, as well as Matthew Menard, Senior Planner, both from the Development Services Department. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Nick.
Great, thank you. And good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. As City Manager Miyake noted, we are here tonight to talk about the Affordable Housing Fee Reduction Program, one of those next right work items. We are seeking direction from Council to have staff prepare an ordinance to reduce the permit review and inspection fees for qualifying affordable housing projects for adoption at a future date. We are prepared to bring this back next Monday if directed by Council, and that can come back on consent also if directed by Council. So for tonight's agenda, we will cover the objectives of the fee reduction program, the process that we are planning to take for this item. We'll discuss in more detail the project proposal as well as funding. That was a missing piece from the December 12th conversation, so we are back with some response on funding as well as council questions that you all had on December 12th. So for objectives, this does relate to the Next Right work. It was one of the 5 actions that council selected back in July of 2022. It was to reduce fees for affordable housing projects. This also relates specifically to the Affordable Housing Strategy Action C5, which more generally talks about reducing the cost of building affordable housing, and as part of that, looking to lowering the fees associated with developing affordable housing. And also in our housing needs assessment, there is a clear need for housing at the 0 to 80% AMI bracket, and so this would encourage that type of housing to happen in the city as well. So for our process, step 1 was the council initiation on December 12th. At that time, staff did provide an overview of the proposed scope as well as schedule, and took some feedback and questions from you all. Tonight we are reporting back, and then we are also seeking that direction to prepare this for final action, which would be our step 3. And step 4 is to have a budget allocation to a CIP. That would happen at the mid-biennium budget at the end of the year. The program can be put in place before that point in time, though, which would be that step 3. And then just to note, we have also had outreach since this was initiated with council. In particular, we've been working very closely with our affordable housing providers in the region to understand their needs and what type of arrangement works best with these programs. We've also been looking to other communities in the region to understand what other cities are doing and to learn from those examples. So with that, I will turn this to Matthew to walk us through the proposal and the December 12th questions.
Thanks, Nick. Excuse me. So I will start with the proposal. Excuse me. For the eligible projects for this, we are proposing that it's 100% affordable housing projects at 80% AMI or below. So that being consistent with the land use code definition of affordable housing. Permanent supportive housing projects, emergency housing projects, homeless services uses, so something like overnight shelters or day centers. And we are recommending that they be affordable for the life of the project. Much like we do with affordable housing, they'd have to sign an agreement with us to maintain that use for the life of the project to receive that fee reduction. The proposed amount of reduction for these projects is 100% of review and inspection fees. So that would be anything that DES would collect from them, not including pass-through fees. So there are some fees that we pass through to the state and also to some utility providers that we would collect and then move on to them. We are not proposing that those be reduced in any way. We are also proposing that there's a cap on pre-development services fees, as that's more open-ended. So do you want to ensure the efficient use of our staff time before we get into the true application process? So we just want to cap the hours of that at an amount so it just doesn't go on indefinitely. The proposed or the estimated annual cost of this program is $310,000 plus inflation over time. The Finance and Asset Management Department has recommended that this be provided to a CIP project with a general fund allocation of that $310,000 to begin with, and that be allocated at the mid-biennium budget update just for simplicity of allocating that budget money. So this was initiated by council at December 12th in 2022. There are 4 main questions that came out of that meeting: whether this program should be limited to only nonprofits, what the anticipated cost of the program is, what alternative funding options other than the general fund that may be available for this program, and should the permitting expediting project and this project be integrated into one process, essentially. So for the first question, should the program only be limited to nonprofits? We are recommending that it not be limited. We do think with the sideboards we have placed on the use, that there's little risk that the program will be abused, and we do want to make sure that it's open to anyone that is going to provide us that affordable housing, regardless of their status as a nonprofit. As we did hear from public comment earlier as well, we do want to make sure that public entities can use this as well. Really, we are trying to target that affordable housing from whatever entity would like to provide us that affordable housing. And they will have to sign that agreement with us, so we are making sure we get those targeted uses through the door before we give them that fee reduction. Again, the cost of this program is anticipated to be $310,000 a year, adding inflation after the next year. This was projected from our business services team in development services using the last 6 years of what would have been qualifying permits. Doing it this way in a CIP, we can also reassess this at every budget cycle. So we will certainly keep data on who is using this program, how much money has been utilized, and whether or not we need to adjust that $310,000 over time, or if we do have some large anticipated costs, we can make that adjustment in the budget cycle. What funding options may be available to support this program? We do think the general fund right now is the most stable and sustainable source of money we have for this program. We did explore other funding mechanisms, looking at grant funding, looking at the 1590 money. Those programs are generally targeted towards specific projects with specific targeted outcomes, and they also tend to limit the use pretty significantly. So we don't think they're appropriate at this time to set up that fund that's more open-ended and that needs to build over time. Because that $310,000 is an average, we're expecting some years will be below that number and some years will be above that number. There may be no projects for a year. So right now, grant funding isn't really set up for that. We will continue to monitor any funding that may be available to offset some of this cost. But right now, we do think the general fund is the best option for this program. And the final question, should permit expediting for affordable housing projects be integrated in this program? As you've heard earlier, we are working internally on expediting permitting. We do want to make sure these processes stay separate for the most efficiency. This is working its way through its own process. We think permit expediting will work through its own process as well. A lot of the permit expediting process is internal to the way we operate. So we think they're best separate, and we think we can get this done more quickly if we remain separate between these two programs. We do think that providers should be able to use both programs for the same project. That would provide the greatest incentive for affordable housing in the city. Again, this is a noted need. Our recent affordable housing study, the needs assessment did show that we have a need across the affordable housing range. So as much incentive as we can provide them, I think that's going to be a benefit towards our goals. It's also a stated goal of council to encourage affordable housing in the city. We don't anticipate there be any negative outcomes for the Development Services Department if we do allow these providers to use both programs. Just as an example, in our system, it's called Horizon. It has come to my attention approximately 2 hours ago that it's been called Plymouth Crossing now, so this is an apt example. So if you would look at this project now with this fee reduction, if it were to be adopted, they would have had approximately $156,000 of fees reduced through our permitting process. They did qualify and would continue to qualify for a transportation and school impact fee exemption. So those fees would all be waived. In terms of expediting permitting, their permitting process was about 1 year and 2 months. The anticipated process, once the expediting process has been completed, is to have staff help them through that process to help them get their application materials together to make sure they are complete and have all the information we need on the first go-around, so there's less wash time in our permitting process to try to reduce that 1 year and 2 month permitting time to something shorter, which will hopefully save them both time and money throughout the process. And again, to reiterate, we are asking that you all direct us to prepare an ordinance to reduce permit review and inspection fees for qualifying affordable housing projects for adoption at a future date. As Nick mentioned, we are prepared to bring this back on consent next Monday if you so desire. And with that, Deputy Mayor, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. I'll turn to my colleagues for any questions or comments. Conrad Lee. Councilmember Lee, thank you.
Good presentation. 310,000, that's for the whole project or for one unit?
So that would be the average annual cost. So some years it'll be higher than that.
For each, for a whole project?
For each year, yep. So
For the whole project, not just one unit?
Not just one unit.
The
It'll
whole
dep-
project.
Yes, so.
How about depending on the size of the project? How many, does it matter?
Yes, so some years you'll see much lower cost than that. For example, the Eastgate campus, which does include that permanent supportive housing project, their total permitting fee was somewhere around $1.2 million. So in certain cycles, you're going to see a higher number than 310,000. So that 310,000 number has been a calculated average over the last 6 years of qualifying projects. So we're hoping the fund can build over time for when we do have that larger project, which are going to take a little bit longer to get through the permitting process to be able to refund those fees or
Last question.
offset.
So when you begin the project, you don't have that many projects. So when you have 310,000 plus inflation each year, you're actually accumulating, building up the fund. Okay. So what's your anticipation? I mean, how fast you're going to build up these projects? When you're going to exhaust the money, if you have too many of them? Or what's your anticipation usually right now?
I don't think we anticipate exhausting it. We don't have anything on the horizon that we're looking like we're going to blow through that budget. Generally, we would know a few years in advance if we have a large project that's going to meet these qualifications, as they are quite unusual. We will use small amounts of that every year. This program will cover things like renovations, so those will be much smaller permit costs. The average annual cost of that was, I think, around $30,000. So I'd expect at least that amount to come out every year. But we do expect this to build for a few years before we see any sort of very large projects.
I guess I misspoke. One more question, that's it. The money you saved up, reserve, is it in the account separately, somewhere in the city, that, you're not going to just, well, we got extra money, let's go have a dinner, celebrate?
Yes, correct. So what has been recommended to us by Finance and Asset Management is to create a separate CIP project. So all the money in that project would be earmarked for this program. So it wouldn't be used for anything else. There's obviously council discretion with how budgeting happens. So you have discretion, and you can also, reevaluate that $310,000 number at each budget cycle as well.
Okay. Yeah, good. We'll be appropriately invested, right? So, Mr. Dave, you know how to grow it, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Zahn?
Yes, thank you. I am super excited about this, especially seeing what the savings could have been for Plymouth Crossing, and then amongst the 3 buildings. So the total fee was actually $1.2 million between the shelter, permanent supportive housing, and the workforce housing. Wow. Okay, well, I would say that I fully support the 100% of the units at 80% AMI, nonprofit and for-profit, because ultimately, if they're building affordable housing at those levels, I absolutely agree with that. As I'm looking at this, I guess when I think about how this might be used, are C1 and being able to work with our religious properties to be able to build permanently affordable housing, maybe the next tranche of need that comes from our community, and knowing that this is available is very, very helpful. I would say that I'm okay right now with the cap on the pre-development fee reduction, but I think for those that are the first time coming to the city, they may need a little more hand-holding. So I would ask for some caution in determining what that cap should be, so that because ultimately we're trying to help them be successful at being able to build affordable housing. So I would just say that. Just want to confirm that this would be both for new housing as well as preservation and renovation. So I know you showed in one of these, some existing buildings, Hidden Village, Highland Village. So if there were these kind of properties that come into play, then renovations would also be eligible for this. And then lastly, the piece around 100% of the review and inspection, but not the pass-through fees. So is there a way for us, and maybe I'm kind of looking at Genesee over there, that we could look at within our ledge priorities, looking at how we might lobby for those costs to be funded through some other means, so that those pass-through costs, whether it's state or utility connections, that we find a way to advocate for those funds to also, those fees to also have some bucket that could be used to help support that as well, because every dollar saved there could potentially be a dollar utilized for more affordable housing the next time. So that would be, I think there were a couple questions I had where I saw some head nods, but I just want to make sure. And then that last one is an ask.
Sure. I can't cover the legislative items. I think Genesee might be able to talk to those. The way the proposal has been laid out, it would include both new builds and existing affordable housing if they met that use criteria. So anything that we've shown on the slides would meet that criteria. Most of them are King County Housing Authority projects. So if they came in for a permit to say, replace a roof or do some work on their building or do an expansion, those would also qualify for the fee reduction.
Okay. No, that's great. Thanks. And I guess the,
Councilmember Stokes? Oh, sorry, did you want to?
well, I was hoping Genesee could comment about the advocacy for those pass-through fees.
Sure. Genesee?
I'll follow up with department staff and you, council member, directly. I want to make sure, I'm not sure I fully tracked all the details, but we can talk more since it's not before you tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Stokes?
Yeah. Doubled it. I really think this is great, and it's a big step forward. One of the questions that prompted me to think about this when Councilmember Zahn was talking, this $310,000, what are we talking about? That's not something that somebody gives us or we give somewhere. It's the fees that we would be collecting on that, right?
So, Councilmember Stokes, the $310,000 is what we're projecting the annual cost of this program would be, in order to reimburse, waive, or refund fees related to the qualifying project types. So we looked back 6 years and at all of our permit data and the cost, and filtered out what would qualify to determine the $310,000.
Yeah, but when we do that, we don't have $300,000 sitting there to do something with.
Correct. We are
it's coming out of
asking for
our funds.
Yeah, general fund allocation and a
okay.
creation of a CIP at the mid-biennium budget.
Yeah, okay.
But tonight's action, we're looking to establish the program, and then at the mid-bi is when the fund would be established.
No, I think it's very reasonable. I just want to make sure it's not that we're getting that fund from someplace else, or it's not sitting there for something. So when the $310,000 goes, it's gone. I mean, it's gone because the city has to pay staff and everything and everything for that, so.
Correct.
Okay. I think it's great.
Great, thank you. Is that, okay, great. Thank you, Councilmember Stokes. Yeah, great presentation. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled with this program as well. I really appreciate the real-world example here. Thank you for including that into this presentation. One ask that I would have is, just as you've done with the review and the inspection fees, if we could put a limit or a set number of months that we could aim for in terms of the expediting. Be it 5 months, be it 6 months, but in order to try and reach that goal, I think you got to have to set that goal first. So the answer was somewhat, we'll try and reduce it, but if you reduce it only by a couple of weeks, I mean, yes, you reduced it, but have you really made an impact with it? Well, maybe not so much. So I'd encourage you to try and put a little bit of teeth in there. I think that'd be great. But overall, fantastic. And with that, I'd be looking for a motion, please.
I'll direct staff to prepare an ordinance to reduce permit review and inspection fees for qualifying affordable housing projects for adoption at a future date.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Wonderful, and that passes. And that concludes our meeting for this evening, and that, well, at least the public portion of our meeting. Our final agenda item is an executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110. The council will recess now and conduct an executive session for approximately 30 minutes, and will adjourn the meeting after the conclusion of that executive session. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.